Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'd like to call the November 9th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. And I'd like to acknowledge that the meeting is taking place on unceded Algonquin territories. I would like to thank the Algonquin nations for hosting this meeting on their land. And I'm assuming that everyone got a copy of the agenda, so I'd like to call for a mover to approve the agenda. Trustee Fisher, thank you very much. And are there any errors, or sorry, are there any additions to the agenda? And seeing no hands, I'd like to call the question on approval of the agenda. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you very much. And moving on in our agenda to delegations. And today we have two delegations. We have one 4-minute delegation and one 2-minute delegation. And I just like to remind our delegants that we like to stick to the time, and I will be monitoring the time, and I will give you fair warning when you're reaching the end of your time. All right, and if you, if for whatever reason we can't finish in that time, then we may request that other things happen. Anyway, so our first delegation is from Nancy Dean, and you have 4 minutes. So go ahead.
Wonderful. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, wonderful. Good evening, and thank you for having me this evening. My name is Nancy Solangi Paradin, and I am here as one of the many parents who are members of the Ottawa-Carleton Assembly of School Councils, known as OCASC. As an officer, once responsible for membership and now for communications, I have been asked to speak to you today to share with you our enthusiasm and support for a recommendation being forwarded by the Parent Involvement Committee to amend policy P010.gov and appoint more parent, guardian, caregiver voice to the Committee of the Whole. OCASC members have passed a motion to support the inclusion of PIC and OCASC as members of this committee, given the complementary and distinct roles that the two of us play to foster parental engagement and support in our community. Due to the pandemic, as you know, the role of parents and caregivers have completely altered and has forced us all to take much personal notice of our education system and how we are engaged in it. The societal call for more equity and inclusion has also opened our eyes to new ways of being. We believe that it's a perfect time to upscale our voice. Parents and caregivers are craving ways to be involved and know that they have a right to be involved. OCASC's longstanding presence has provided and honed a valuable and much needed resource for us parents. Our members repeatedly tell us that being part of OCASC assists them in many ways that nothing else does. The monthly gatherings, where more than a third of the schools in the district come to discuss our board and committee of the whole business every month. We share best practices. We gain insights on larger issues facing education. We gain timely advice on relevant matters. We receive wonderful inspiration between each other and much needed support from each other. And even outside of the meetings, OCASC provides opportunities for us to connect and communicate with each other. All of this makes a significant impact on the functioning of councils and positively affects our experience on the education system. Attending OCASC gives the parents a wider view of the roles that councils can play and the awareness of the huge impact councils can have. PIC 2 is also a great resource with its mandate and its ministry legislation. PIC provides parents with another level of engagement. It provides a more formal platform where parent voice can be received. Together, we both play a vital and distinct role. We are also excited with the OCDSB Student Achievement Through Equity program with its foundational principle that parents and caregivers are critical partners in our child's education and that our perspective and voice are valued. It's fantastic that its objective is to engage and collaborate with us to support student achievement and well-being. We strongly support PIC's recommendation and believe that this makes sense. There are more than one seat at the table that represents other stakeholders. For example, 2 student voices, many teacher and staff voices, as well as community partners. It's imperative that that representation reflect the impactful role that parents and guardians play in student achievement and well-being. The opportunity to have a larger voice directly speaks to the value that OCDSB places on our significant stake in education. We wanted to reiterate how vitally important it is and how empowering a message it would be, and it would send us to have both PIC and OCASC here at the table where critical decisions are made and important decisions are made. We also want to express our hope that this is the beginning of even more parental engagement in communities. So on behalf of all of OCASC, our members and parents, thank you for your attention and time this evening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dean. And we are permitted to have up to 3 questions of clarification amongst the trustees on your delegation. And are there any questions? And we do have a question from Trustee Scott. Go ahead.
Thank you. And thanks for being here tonight, Nancy. Your delegation is much appreciated. I just wondered if you could expand briefly on how the roles of PIC and OCASC are distinct.
Oh, for sure. I think part of I think one of the biggest differences, well, not a difference, but distinct, is that with figuring the whole idea of school councils, we have already a structure in place that allows us to communicate directly with each other. Sorry, I'm trying to think of what that, yeah, basically that it has a role that is not in place 100% yet in PIC. We support each other. We believe that it's a base, an arm of that as well, but definitely we have a different way. We are not legislated, and so we can be there's a lot more that we can do between ourselves that is much more responsive in time as well. So those are some of the ways that it's helpful. I'm not sure if, I'm going to ask also my Christine as well, if she wants to help me with that too. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if.
Thank you for your response.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. And no further questions. I'd like to thank you for your delegation, Ms. Dean. And we're going to move on to our second delegation, which is a 2-minute delegation. Diana Mills and Martin Reed. And similarly, you have 2 minutes. So go ahead.
Thank you, Diane. I'm hoping maybe on this call, she sends her apologies. She's on a train and thus connectivity is sketchy at best. The Parent Involvement Committee met on October the 13th and the committee voted in favour of a motion recommending the board consider a revision to policy P010, community involvement on the board standing committees, and to appoint a rep from the PIC committee to have a seat on the COW. The board standing committees predates the current practice of having other advisory committees sit as reps on the COW. It also predates the establishment of the PIC. In light of that, the motion from the PIC is to recommend that the board consider a revision to the policy and appoint a PIC rep to the COW. Whereas PIC is a legislated committee whose mandate is to represent the interests of parents and school councils of the school district. And also it is an advisory body into the OC, to the board, sorry. And it would be good to have that designated role instead of relying on myself writing a report once a year. As I stated, the PIC is a mandated body under the Education Act or the Regulation 612, and is the formal body for parents, its parental voice across the board and the district. We'd like to amend section 2.1a and 2.2b to add the addition of the Parent Involvement Committee. And I'm happy to take any questions or to tie up anything on the role of PIC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reid. And we do have one question from Trustee Campbell. Trustee Campbell, go ahead.
Thank you very much for being here and providing your presentation. You mentioned in the oral, and I did see it in the written version that was submitted earlier. In terms of the mandate statement you describe in the presentation, I wonder what its source is, or maybe if you could explain that further. My understanding from a review of the regulation and indeed the PIC bylaws locally is that the mandate is to provide advice, strategy, support for parental engagement. And it's fairly specifically narrowly aimed at improving parental engagement in a variety of ways, which is a long way short of representing asserting representation. So providing advice with respect to is different from asserting representation. But further, it's a narrow set of interests. It's not necessarily all parent interests, right? Parents have other interests, obviously, than wanting to be engaged, right? They have many other interests. So, but as I say, the formal mandate, written mandate references that I've seen anyway, don't seem to extend to all interests, or indeed to suggest that the PIC is representative of all parents. So I was just wondering if you could bridge that gap for me.
Certainly. So historically, there hasn't been a parent involvement committee across Ontario, and I'm waiting for my incredibly slow computer to open up. So Regulation 612/00 was introduced, which formalised both school councils and parent involvement bodies. In this particular case, if I scroll down to the section on parent involvement committee, with the speed of a striking sloth on my laptop, I do apologise for this. I did have this all set up. In section 27, the purpose of the Parental Involvement Committee is to support, encourage and enhance parent engagement at the board level in order to improve student achievement and well-being. And there's a series of other things listed in there. The Involvement Committee shall develop strategies and initiatives in order to do this. And it's described in detail in section 612, which I unfortunately have an unhealthy interest in, and I wouldn't want anybody else to have to do that. And across the whole of Ontario, ministry engagement with parents cascades down through the PIC. So Ottawa is quite unique in that predates with the OCAS setup. So, for example, in Toronto, North Bay, York, similar education areas, the PIC is that body that they reach out. And I regularly attend ministry meetings and representations on policies that are bringing forward. The expectation is that we provide that parental voice. Any parent can join the PIC. We've just gone through a membership round. We're very conscious, and we've had an incredibly good collection of people, over 30 candidates, wide breadth of different interests, both as parents and for their children within the education system. So sitting on that committee is a wide breadth of parents that are not there for a single activist voice. So, for example, they're not there as a school council, special educational needs, or the Arts Council.
I thank you. I appreciate that. I guess my question, if I may, though, is pretty specific to the formal written mandate, right? So I think what you're suggesting is, at least at the provincial level, the province has found other uses. That's fine. But I'm thinking about the actual regulation, written regulation, and the PIC bylaws written here are focused not on PIC representation of all interests of parents, right? It's focused on advice, not representation, advice on how to engage parents, and it not on any other parent interest. And I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I'm trying to understand how you bridge that gap.
So in which case there is no mandate. Taking that as a very narrow resolve, there is no mandate for parents to have an actual overview. They can do that through the ballot box for the trustees, but the trustees don't always answer to the parents. They also answer to other community requirements.
That's good. Your assertion is that your actual mandate goes beyond the written mandate. That's fine. I think I have my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And are there There are further questions for Mr. Reid? And seeing no further questions, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Reid, for your delegation. And you're certainly welcome to stick around and watch the live stream where this item will probably be very, very actively debated in the future. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go back to my school council meeting and excuse me.
And so moving on to our agenda, we're moving to item number 4, briefing from the chair of the board. I'd like to call upon Chair Scott to provide her briefing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Remembrance Week, an important time to pause and reflect. We recognized Indigenous Veterans Day on Monday, and we will be marking Remembrance Day on Thursday. On November the 11th at 10:30 a.m., we would invite students, staff, families, and community members to join us for a virtual ceremony featuring the work of OCDSB students. A link for the ceremony can be found on our website. On behalf of the board, I would like to extend our gratitude to all military families in our community and to all those with loved ones who have served. We appreciate your sacrifice, and we commit to support student learning that not only remembers and honors that sacrifice, but that equips students with the character traits that will lead to a more just and peaceful world. I also would like to note that the Ottawa Student Transportation Authority has launched its annual online transportation survey. OSTA is seeking input so that they can better understand just how children have been getting to school this year, and also to learn what traffic impacts families have seen around their children's schools. This is important information for OSTA as they begin to plan for next year and set up the process for transportation for next September. Please visit the OSTA website for more details. And that's everything I have for this evening, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair Scott. And are there any questions for Chair Scott on her briefing? And seeing no questions, we're going to move on to briefing from the director, and I'd like to turn it over to Director Williams-Taylor for her briefing.
Thank you, through you, Chair. The OCDSB is committed to providing a safe, caring, and inclusive learning environment for all students. Bullying is a serious and far too prevalent issue that we all need to work on together to address. From November the 15th to 19th, schools across Ontario will be recognizing Bullying Awareness and Prevention Week. We believe that everyone has a responsibility to stop bullying behavior. Students and staff are learning more about bullying and its effect on student learning and well-being. Educators play a key role in teaching and supporting children's healthy relationships and working with students to support those affected by bullying as well as those who engage in this behavior. This topic did come up during our Safe Schools consultations. I'd like to take the opportunity at this point to thank students, families, and staff for your feedback as we work to update our Safe Schools policies. The final policies, which incorporate feedback on our police involvement in schools review, will be shared with the trustees for discussion and approval in the winter of 2022. As we reflect on bullying, it's also worth highlighting that November 20th is Transgender Day of Remembrance. To mark this, we're hosting a webinar on Thursday, November 18th for students, staff, and families. This information session will help participants learn more about transgender identity and support for trans and gender diverse students. Registration details can be found on our website. And to close, I'd like to remind families that Friday, November 12th will be a PA day for all elementary and secondary students. There will be no remote or in-person classes held on this date. And at this point, with your indulgence, Chair, I will also turn to the COVID update if you would like me to proceed.
Yes, please, Madam Chair, or Madam Director.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So we do have a more brief than usual, I think, update, COVID update today. We have some of our data as well as some operational updates that will be brought from AD Reynolds. We also have some updates regarding community use of schools, as well as human resource updates from Superintendent McCoy. So at this point, I'll turn to AD Reynolds to get us started, who will then turn it along in sequence. AD Reynolds.
Great, thanks very much. Can I get the next slide, please? So just an update on where we stand as of today. You can see that we have 26 active cases, students, 1 staff. Among students, it's mostly at the elementary level. I think about 6 of those cases are secondary, which would be expected given the vaccination rates. But you see the number of the cases and closed classes are resolving quite well as we move forward, and the numbers are progressing in a hopeful trend. Next slide, please. So we're continuing to look at how we expand extracurricular opportunities for students. As you know, secondary athletics is up and running. We've seen bands resume meeting in person. We've begun conversations with elementary athletic leads around how that may start in the coming months. And we're continuing to look at other opportunities for more engagement. Some key clubs have begun to resume in schools as well. There have been questions around returning to regular semester program. As you know, this is a decision that rests with the province. The province has made it their mandate to determine whether or not schools will be permitted to return to regular semester systems and have more than 2 classes a day. Right now, we are restricted to 2 classes a day. Province has suggested that this is something that they are looking at and that they are speaking with various health authorities about it. Locally, we have informed Ottawa Public Health that the OCDSB would be in favor of a return to full regular semester. We hope that we may hear an update from the province for the second half of the school year. And workload processing positive cases continues to be a challenge for staff in schools as well as for OPH. But just so that trustees and the members of the public are aware, most of the work around identifying high-risk contacts and who should be communicated with and when, a lot of that is borne at the school level and continues to be a challenge for our school level administrators among managing the other protocols and initiatives that we have in place. Next slide, please. So as you are aware also, we are hopeful that vaccinations for youth and children aged 5 to 11 years will begin shortly in Ottawa, again within the coming weeks. We've been collaborating with OPH and CHEO and the vaccination partners on plans for vaccine clinics for children. They would be community-based clinics. And we are discussing using our facilities for after-school clinics as well, which would allow parents to bring their children in for vaccinations should they so choose. And so we are playing a role, in assisting with communications and building awareness and supporting OPH in these plans. Next slide. I'll ask CFO Carson to speak a little bit about community use of schools.
Thanks, Brett. We reported at the last meeting that based on a number of circumstances, we did not foresee moving ahead with community use of school prior to January of 2022. As we've continued to work with the City of Ottawa and Ottawa Public Health, it may be possible to begin a partial reopening. We are, because of the uncertainty around the use of elementary schools and the fact that students in those buildings continue to be unvaccinated at this time, we are only looking at secondary schools. We are continuing that work, and we hope to have some further information coming out later this week or early next week. I need to advise that based on our evaluation of staffing and how we can manage the uses inside the building, it will be a limited use. And unfortunately, there will be a number of our usual permit holders who will be disappointed at this time, but it is, we continue to move forward carefully, recognizing that our first commitment is to have the buildings ready the next morning for students. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. And if Superintendent McCoy could please give us an update on the rollout of the vaccine policy.
That's through you, Mr. Chair. So at this point, as you reported previously, of our almost 12,000 employees, as of today, 11,704 employee responses have been received, and of those 11,424 are reporting that they are fully vaccinated, which represents 97.6% of respondents. 1% of respondents are currently reporting that they are partially vaccinated, and we continue to follow up with those individuals to remind them to submit a new attestation once they are fully vaccinated, which is defined as 14 days following receipt of their second vaccination. We have a 1.4% of employees who have responded who have sought an exemption based on human rights protected grounds, or are reporting that they are unvaccinated or refuse to disclose. And as has been reported this week, we currently have 53 permanent employees who have been placed on administrative unpaid leave as a result of the fact that they are not vaccinated or partially vaccinated and have not been approved for an exemption. Next slide, please. In addition, we continue to implement the third-party attestation, which applies to frequent visitors who interact directly with students and staff in our schools and other workplaces, and working with both contractors and on-fee and other community agency partners who have people in our schools. The ministry directives require that we collect proof of vaccination and proof of completion of the education program for third parties. We have indicated to our community partners who may have their own vaccination mandates in place that in lieu of receipt of the actual vaccination receipt, we are prepared to accept letters from third parties which confirm that they have done their due diligence and received confirmation of vaccination from anyone who is attending in a school or OCDSB workplace. Next slide. As well, we continue to emphasize that the information that is collected with regard to vaccines is personal health information, and continue to encourage all staff, students, and parents to respect the privacy of individuals with respect to this information, and to respect the personal choice that individuals make with regard to vaccine, and to avoid speculation or gossip on vaccine status, which we know can be divisive and create unnecessary conflict. So that's part of our consistent messaging, both to our administrators and managers, as well as to staff through our regular updates.
And now we turn things, open the floor for questions.
Thank you very much. And I'm wondering if there's anyone that has, any trustees or anyone has questions. And we do have a list, starting with Trustee Blackburn. Trustee Blackburn, you're muted.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that. Through you, Mr. Chair, to I assume what is to the Associate Director. Can you speak about when we may foresee, and I know things are unpredictable, in-person clubs at the intermediate level, given there's a high vaccination rate at that grade level?
Thank you for the question. So, you know, the restrictions, we're trying to see what we can do during the day, which is one of the, you know, a lot of the clubs operate during the day as opposed to after school hours, with the restrictions that we have in place around students remaining in their cohorts through eating time, through recess time, really trying to avoid situations where students from different cohorts are mixing. We're going to have the conversation with public health and our other coterminous districts to see how they've managed that, if they have managed that, or what their recommendations may be. But the educational guidance from the province around elementary cohorts, and that's K to 8, including the intermediates who have seen high rates of vaccination, is such that really they're not to see cohort mixing except maybe outside. And even then, where that happens, it's to be avoided. Where it does happen, they are to be masked even when outside. So we're trying to find a middle ground. So in terms of the when, Trustee Blackburn, with the current guidance that we have right now, I'm not entirely sure when we'll see during the day meeting of clubs. It's one of the challenges we're having with intramurals and athletics as well. But we're working on that. We're having conversations about it this week to try to see how we can come up with something in person as opposed to virtual. Virtual, we can have those opportunities happening.
Thank you, Associate Director, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Trustee Blackburn. Moving on to Trustee Fisher.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. And I think my question is for Brett as well. And it wasn't specifically raised, but I've heard other boards and schools in the city are organizing the student photos this year. And I'm just wondering what our plans are in that regard. I know last year, I think everybody decided to postpone them. This year, some seem to be doing it, but I'm not quite sure where we stand as a board on that issue. Can you give us an update?
Sure. So, between the different schools, there's only really a few providers that we work with. It's sort of a few companies, and we worked with them last year on protocols around safely doing grad photos. Given at the start of the year, we weren't entirely sure what might happen over the course of the year, we decided to get the grad photos done right up front. So we do have our photography companies in schools getting the grade 12 grad photos done, and they should be wrapping up shortly. After that, we'll turn to having the providers with certain protocols work with other schools to get other student photos done. It is slower than it was in the past because obviously there has to be a little more time and distance and sanitizing between individual students. So after they're done the grad photos, we're going to touch base with them again, see if they think they can do all the regular photography. We obviously will be doing it within cohorts of kids. We won't have the the kids standing shoulder to shoulder for the one photo. The companies are looking at other options of composites and things of that nature. I foresee it coming if things continue to progress the way that it is. It's just we started with grad photos to get those done and out of the way, so that there was no chance of them being disrupted later on in the year if things had not progressed well.
Okay, that's fair. Not to pin you down. So is it for the remainder of the students, is it safe to say that we're probably looking at the new year before anything gets rolled out in a serious way?
Probably, yeah, given that we're 6 weeks away or so from the break, but
we'll
see, they'll have learned from, and what we have to ascertain is, do they think they'll have the capacity, having now the experience of the grad photos, to get to everyone, or do we have to try to prioritize? And if we do that, that'll be another conversation to figure out how we do that.
Sure, it's helpful. If it's worth anything, I know that I'm getting calls from parents who see other schools and school boards doing it. So obviously we don't want to be pressured into doing it just because someone else is doing it. But I think some schools and some families are feeling a bit left out, maybe left behind in our case. So I guess stay tuned. We'll see what happens.
Yep,
okay.
Exactly.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you very much, Trustee Fisher. And moving on to Trustee Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Trustee Fisher, for asking my question. I was at a school council meeting this evening where student photos were a hot topic, and I'm glad to hear that there is a potential that we will be able to do them later in the year. I did have another question, though, as well, and that relates to sports at the intermediate level in terms of the kinds of things that can be done where students might be able to mix from different cohorts in the outdoor setting, or even if there is any potential for having school-wide extracurricular sports in an indoor setting, and when do we think that might be able to happen?
Thank you. So work is starting on planning the spring sports and seeing what sports we may be able to realistically do in the spring for our intermediates, taking advantage of being outdoors. So there will be, I'm very confident that we will have something once the snow melts and for the balance of the year. The inside is a little tricky for a couple of reasons. Finding the number of staff volunteers may not be there that were there for coaching teams, but how we've generally accommodated elementary sports, not exclusively, but generally, has been to bring multiple teams together for a full day tournament within a gym. And when you do that, you see 8, 9, 10 school teams and their coaches in a relatively small space for several hours of the day. And we just felt that was, potentially too risky, even with a high uptake of vaccination. So we're looking at what we might be able to do in the new year, in the winter indoors. It may be, but again, we're just having this, it's hard to find the wiggle room to allow daytime play for even intermediate students when the restrictions, one set of restrictions is so tight that they can't even mix it recess. It seems to be sort of flying in the face of those things if we bring them together for, inter-school mixing of cohorts even for athletics. But the outdoor stuff we're definitely working on for when we have good weather, if not sooner. And we're seeing if we can move forward with something before the winter's up as well. But we just need people to continue to be patient.
Yeah, I think it is a real concern, particularly for this grade 7 and 8 students. I know that one of the schools in my area managed to organize a track and field day, but it was not the same because the kids were all kept in their own cohorts. And if you're looking at things like soccer, which the kids would dearly love to be able to do and learn the team skills, if you're not allowed to mix cohorts at all, even for a handful of kids, that becomes a real disappointment to a lot of our students. And I think that one of the things we need to be considering here is the mental health of the kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Scott. And Trustee Schwartz.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And just following on Trustee Scott's line of questioning, I've also been getting a number of phone calls from families, predominantly in the intermediate level, concerned about sort of the cohorting that they're seeing continuing on in classroom, or sorry, not in the classrooms, but in like in the playgrounds around recess time. And the masking requirements, and questioning why the OCDSB is continuing this practice when other boards are not, that there's also a mix of some schools aren't in fact doing the cohorting in the way that some others are, and also just referencing the fact that many kids who are involved in extracurricular sports outside of the school don't have to do this. So why are we doing it, the OCDSB? So if I could just get a comment, AD Reynolds, on sort of, are we talking to public health about perhaps shifting that? Or where might this be going? And is it in line with what you're saying around team sports and other extracurricular? Thank you.
Thank you. So one of the reasons that we, and I would assume really most, if not all, school districts should be following the cohorting guidelines that we essentially are, including those at recess, is because that's what the province mandated as part of reopening schools. The ministry has not changed the reopening guidance yet, and they do not make a distinction for grade 7 and 8s over lower grades, despite the vaccination, at least not in anything I've read. We do have these conversations with our local public health unit, who then has opportunities to bring our comments forward to provincial table from time to time. And for example, when looking at the changing, going back to regular semester classes possibly for later in the year, the province has asked for input, I gather, from health units, and so we've been sure to provide them with our thoughts on that, and we'll continue to provide similar kind of thoughts around perhaps reconsidering some of the restrictions that are in place for 7s and 8s. But it's right from the ministry guidelines. If because of school site or yard or configuration, you can't maintain distancing between cohorts over, recess time or outside time, then masking is to be required. They are to stay in their cohorts for 1 day, including meal times during the day. Those are not things that we came up with on our own.
That's very helpful, AD Reynolds. And just to sort of close the loop on this then, if parents are quite frustrated by this and seeing this as their best line, really, rather than sending letters to the director of our board or sending letters to Dr. Virasechis, would the appropriate approach then be just citing their concerns with this approach, predominantly the mental health considerations, perhaps with the ministry, so that the ministry is hearing directly from parents? And again, perhaps you don't want to answer that question, but I will just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Schwartz. And moving on to Trustee Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me, pardon me. And thank you, Trustee Fisher, for the question regarding photos, class photos. I've had a number of parents asking that as well. But I also have a number of parents asking about the designated drop-off and pickup areas. There's a lot of families, parents that are concerned with the lack of consideration for following COVID guidelines, wearing masks, et cetera, and sort of gathering in large groups and not being considerate of other families. Is there anything that we can do as a board to help families better understand that they, how they should stand or whatever at these areas?
So thanks for raising that. It's not a concern that I have often heard, but I'm certainly not surprised to hear that it's one that is out there. So we'll take that back and work with our communications folks, as well as some of our principals, to see what we might be able to do to better promote safe protocols during those drop off and pickup times, even though they're outdoors. We can see what we can do around that.
Thank you very much, Trustee Jenkins. And moving on to Trustee Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to respond to Trustee Schwartz's question about we could raise this with the ministry. I would be happy to raise it in one of the chair's teleconferences, that we need to maybe consider some distinctions for grade 7 and 8 as opposed to other elementary.
Thank you, Trustee Scott. Any further questions on the COVID-19 briefing for the director or the associate director? And seeing none, thank you very much for that update. And we're moving on to section 7, reports from statutory and other committees. And I'd like to call for a mover to receive the report from the Advisory Committee on Special Education Advisory Committee report dated October 6, 2021. Thank you, Trustee Ellis. And are there any errors and or omissions? And seeing none, I'd like to call the question on this. All those in favor of receiving the report? And in light with our new procedure, if you could say your name and if you're in favor.
Schwartz in favor.
Huff in favor.
Blackburn in favor.
Lyra in favor.
Fisher in favor.
Ellis in
Scott
favor.
in favor.
Ella in favor.
Jenkins in favor.
Campbell in favor.
Penny in favor. And all those opposed? And seeing no one opposed, the Trustee Ellis, are you opposed?
No, sorry, Chair, but it's my understanding, since I've turned on my mic, that we're only doing a voice out of our votes for substantive, such as motions, that the receipt of statutory reports aren't necessarily for voice call.
Okay. Good note there, Trustee Ellis. Thank you very much. So that passes and the report is received. So we're moving on to Parent Involvement Committee. I'd like to call for a mover to receive the report from the Parent Involvement Committee of October 13th, 2021. Trustee Huff, thank you very much. And are there any errors and or omissions? Trustee Bell?
I was just, I don't know if this is a point of order, but have the minutes been approved by the minutes of PIC? Are they then approved by the chair of PIC? And have they been approved? If point of clarification order on that?
Executive Officer Drew?
The minutes of all of the advisory committees come to this committee for receipt. And they do go to the next meeting, but it would often be the case that they would come to committee of the whole before the next meeting of the respective committee, because they don't all meet monthly and they don't meet in the same cycle necessarily. So in this case, the meeting was fairly recent. They wouldn't have been at the committee yet because the committee meets after this meeting.
Okay, so just one point of clarification. We're approving these minutes without them having been approved by the committee themselves?
Committee of the whole receives the minutes.
Yeah.
It's a receipt process, not an approval process, so that this committee is aware of the discussions that are taking place at its advisory committee meetings, and also is able to receive and respond to any recommendations that might be contained in the committee reports, such as a recommendation that's contained in this report this evening.
Great, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you very much, Trustee Bell. And is there any errors or omissions in this report? And seeing none, I'd like to call the question on receipt of this report. All those in favor?
Scott in favor.
And opposed? And that passes. Thank you very much. And there is one recommendation in the report, and I'd like to call upon Trustee Huff to present the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair Penny. Sorry, my voice is a little crazy here. I would like to, this recommendation was moved by Diana Mills, and I will move that in substitution. That sections 2.1 and 2.22 of p.010.gov, community involvement on board standing committees, be amended to include a parent involvement committee representative on the committee of the whole. I trust that my colleagues have read the minutes and have had a little bit of an overview of the discussion that took place. And I would like to open the floor for debate and look forward to hearing what my colleagues have to say on this issue.
Thank you very much, Trustee Huff. And I'm trusting that will serve as your introduction. And so we're going to go to the floor with this, and we're I do have a list starting with Trustee Boothby. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to make an amendment to the motion. And I'd like to add to the end of it the words "to replace OCASC."
Okay, and Manager Guthrie or Manager Owen, or I was wondering if we could have that on the, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Campbell or Trustee
Yes,
Campbell?
thank you. I wondering if, in order, is this not a substantive change, removing an appointed member of the committee of the whole? Have we had notice for that? I'm just not.
I have not given notice, Chair, and if I have to, then perhaps, so I'll take advice, and if I have to, then I will ask to have this motion deferred then.
Maybe what I'll do is I will consult with Executive Officer Giroux on the if this is defeating the purpose of the motion, because just to seek her professional advice. Executive Officer.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the motion does not convert, or the proposed amendment does not convert the motion to a direct negative. It also, if I am not mistaken, was part of the deliberation at the PIC meeting. I believe at that meeting, there was discussion about a motion that would have amended the policy to substitute PIC where the policy had OCASC. So I don't think that if you think about the provisions in our bylaw that provide that anything that was discussed at committee can be brought up at board, I think it would be in order without further or specific notice having been provided.
Mr. Chair, if I may, on a follow-up.
Is it another point of order, Trustee Campbell?
It's related on the basis of the executive officer's advice. We just approved or received the minutes of the PIC. Is that discussion? I didn't see that discussion in the minutes we just received.
I wasn't at the PIC meeting, and perhaps the trustee who is the rep or someone else who was at the meeting can speak to it, but it was my understanding that that was part of the discussion. You know, I may stand corrected, but if it was part of the discussion, I would hope that it was reflected in the minutes.
Well, Mr. Chair, we just received the minutes without that. So I think maybe this does have to be deferred. This is somewhat of a surprise to me, and it's an extremely substantive change. We have previously voted on an appointment. Adding another body doesn't detract from any other body. This is a very substantive change. And so I would object. I actually do quite object to the addition of this. I think it's inappropriate and by our bylaws.
Trustee Campbell, I acknowledge your objection. I do note that Trustee Boothby's proposed amendment does not negate the addition of a parent involvement committee representative. Therefore, I'm going to rule that it is in order. You certainly have the right to challenge the chair on that ruling if you wish.
Chair, it's not that I like doing it, but I will have to challenge the chair. It's just not my read of the situation. On that basis, one could add anything to a motion if it wasn't a direct negative to it, add any other matter. And I just can't agree. So I am forced, I feel duty bound to challenge.
Okay, so we're going
Chair?
into, yes, Trustee Boothby?
Can I just ask to have my amendment withdrawn and take my words back and just move this then to move to defer this so that I can bring this motion back to either board or have agenda planning decide when it goes on to the next motion so that we can provide enough notice, not only to trustees, but also to PIC and OCASC.
Okay, so I believe the correct,
is that in order?
I believe the correct procedure, you've introduced it, but Executive Officer, how do we proceed here?
So just to clarify, and my apologies, I was reading in the minutes as the trustee was speaking. So if I heard correctly, trustee Boothby is asked to withdraw the amendment. And the amendment is on the floor, and so it requires the agreement of the committee to withdraw it. And then it would be a motion to, there would need to be a motion to defer the item to a subsequent meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. So the is the request to withdraw the amendment debatable?
Let me just double check.
No, it is not. I
Not
believe.
debatable, no.
Okay, so
Non-debatable or amendable.
okay, so I'd like to call the question on trustee Boothby's request to withdraw her amendment. All those in favor?
Wait. Can I ask a point of order, please? Before we do this?
Do you have a point of order, trustee Blackburn?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, but I don't understand why we're not going in order. Trustee Campbell challenged the chair. I don't understand why we just don't vote on that. I appreciate what trustee Boothby is trying to do, and it's very collegial on her part. However, I don't understand why we don't, perhaps some trustees want to deal with this tonight, and Executive Officer Giroux has made a ruling on whether or not trustee Boothby's amendment is in order. You have made a ruling on whether or not you believe her amendment is in order, and one trustee thus far has indicated he doesn't think it's in order, and that's fair enough. He's entitled to his opinion, but I think we should vote on that.
Right, trustee Blackburn. So I'm ruling that the motion is in order, since, and my reasoning is that it doesn't directly negate the motion. So I guess the wording of this is, shall the chair's ruling be upheld? And so all those that feel the trustees, or sorry, the chair's ruling is upheld, please put your hand up.
Sorry, just a reminder, Mr. Chair, the chair does not vote on the ruling. The decision of the chair does not vote.
Thank you.
Scott in favor of upholding the chair's ruling.
Fisher in favor.
Schwartz in favor.
Blackburn in favor.
Lyra in favor.
Jenikins in favor.
Huff in favor.
And all those opposed?
Campbell in disfavor.
Boothby not in favor.
Bell wanting to abstain, opposed.
I have 7 in favor and 3 opposed and 1 abstain and 1 not voting. So the chair's ruling is upheld. So the motion is in order. And so we're going to proceed then. So trustee Boothby, are you prepared to introduce your motion, your amendment?
I am, Chair, thank you. Okay, so my reasoning is PIC's got a provincial mandate, and it's to support, encourage, and enhance parent engagement at the board level in order to improve student achievement and well-being, provide information and advice on parent engagement and communications with the board, communicate and support school councils, develop strategies and initiatives to help boards engage parents to support their children's learning at home, at school, especially parents who may find engagement challenging, identify barriers to parent engagement, and help ensure that schools of the board create a welcoming environment for the pupils of for parents of pupils. And further, OCDSB has established that PIC shall provide outreach to parents recognizing that the barriers of time, language, recent immigration, socioeconomic status, newness to the system, or other factors. OCASC on its website and constitution state that it's an umbrella organization for school councils and parents to share information and facilitate communication within the OCDSB communities to enhance the education of all students, facilitates communication about current board activities, and provide input to board committees through OCASC's representation on OCDSB committees, discuss issues of general concern to school boards, and make appropriate recommendations to the board. And there are several others. But OCASC was formed back in 1997, long before the provincial mandate of PICS. It's done a very good job over the years, bringing the voice of parents to the boards via school council members, but it doesn't have the provincial mandate. Less than 50% of our schools are OCASC members currently. Under the regulation 612-00, school councils may make recommendations to the board on any matter. The roles of PIC and OCASC are similar and overlapping, and they're potentially confusing to parents. PICs participate at the board level and focus on things that affect schools, students, and parents more broadly. Subcommittees of PICs may include non-PIC members, giving a chance for unheard voices. PIC has the ability to have broader representation. Members do not have to be school council members appointed by a school council. Not every one of our schools has school councils. Not all parents understand the role of school councils or feel welcome. PIC's been striving for diversity in its membership and making sure many voices are heard. OCASC has a seat at PIC and could raise their questions and concerns through PIC. PIC must provide the board an annual summary report. There's no such requirement for OCASC. PIC has, by provincial mandate, essentially taken over the district's parental voice, and therefore I believe that PIC should be replacing OCASC around the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Boothby. And we do have some speakers. Moving to Trustee Bell, go ahead.
Could I get some clarification through you, Chair, on whether or not PIC supported the idea at the last meeting of this proposal?
We would have to go to someone who is at the meeting to make a commentary on that, and that maybe we'll get an answer from Trustee Huff.
Yes, I'd be glad to speak to this issue. The discussion at PIC indicated, and I apologize on my colleagues, I did not catch the omission in the minutes that related to this portion of the discussion. And my recommendation is that we review those minutes and get the details available to everybody. But the basic message from PIC was that they wanted to maintain the presence of both OCASC and PIC at the table. So that is what came out of that discussion.
Thank you, Trustee Huff, for that clarification. Unfortunately, I was not at this meeting and missed, I'm sure, what was a rich discussion. I've attended both of these meetings, OCASC and PIC, and I can say from my limited experience that the type of discussion is very different. And I think the types of concerns that are raised in OCASC, from what I've seen, I've been quite impressed to the level and depth that they can get to as community representatives. And although I have seen incredible representation on PIC, the agenda is very focused and prepared much farther in advance. So I think those types of interventions that address the issues of the day are given limited airtime. And I think to say that it would be sufficient enough to have the type of weight that school councils give to OCASC through a voice on PIC, then through to COW, I think is very, very different. And so I would just like to say that I very much appreciate the voice and the expertise of representatives from school councils at our committee of the whole meetings. And so I will be voting for more parent voice where possible. We have a long way to go when it comes to ensuring wider representation from the community. So why I find it really hard to understand why we would want to limit the avenues to get parents involved at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Bell. And I see that Executive Officer did have a staff comment on maybe the previous.
Only to clarify for members that the discussion is reflected under new business in item 9 on the minutes of the meeting for those who are looking for it.
Thank you very much. And moving on to Trustee Mullison. Sorry, Christine Mullison. Ms. Mullison, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thank you. One of the things I did want to touch on is something that's a bit of a misrepresentation. Trustee Boothby did mention that she said that you had to be a council member to attend OCASC. That is incorrect. Anyone can come to a meeting at OCASC. We make sure that our meetings are open to anyone. Any parent that has any question, issue, concern is welcome to come at any time. Also, unlike at a PIC meeting, where if a parent does want to speak, they do have to create a delegation and actually fall within those delegation guidelines. We make sure that our floor is open to anyone at any time. Anyone can raise any question, anyone can touch any topic. Nothing is off the table, and we aren't stuck simply to the agenda in which was provided to us. We try and make sure that we include everyone and any topic that may come up. And one of the things that I'm a little concerned about, especially with PIC, is I know right now with your format online, parents are not able to attend meetings. Parents are allowed to watch it live stream. Parents are not able to engage in the actual meeting, meaning that if parents have questions, unless they delegate, which is an extremely intimidating thing to make a parent do, especially if you have people who are new to the country, who are new to the board, who are new just in general. You're going to have people who are turned off and not want to reach out and not want to delegate and not want to have their issues addressed. That's a concern. That's limiting engagement. That's limiting how you're going to reach parents. We make sure that we're inclusive and invite anyone. We are more than happy to join and work with PIC. We think having another voice is fantastic. Another difference between the two of us is PIC's committee members are selected. Ours aren't. Anyone can join. Everyone is welcome. It's not a select committee. It's everyone and anyone. Trustees can come, members of staff can come, members of the public can come, members of the community can come. We don't limit who comes. We're very fortunate that we've had this seat. We think that we represent a great number of people. We also are a little concerned about the amount of time and hours that we know we put in. Will people at PIC be able to put in those hours and those volunteer hours and answer those questions for parents? Are you going to have staff that's going to help people at PIC do the work and the research that they're going to need? How much is that going to cost the board? Is that aligned into the budget for next year? Has that been contemplated at all? There are a lot of factors going in here that I don't think are being considered. Having two parent voices at the table that represent different angles is great. You want to talk about engagement, you want to have more involvement, you want to see more parents at the table, have two seats. Having one seat and limiting it to a select committee is not the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mullison. And moving on to Trustee Ellis.
Thank you.
Sorry, Trustee Ellis, my mistake. It's actually Trustee Campbell. Sorry about that.
Oh, was it? Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Chris. Whoops, there we go. So I guess I'd like to, first off, there are large portions of what Trustee Boothby has suggested that I'm quite sympathetic to. When I do, again, I'm focused on written mandate. I'm personally, and I'll get to that, pretty leery of going beyond the law. So in any event, or what are written mandates? But in any event, when I compare the OCAS Constitution, I've made a bit of a study of it recently with the PIC bylaws and the regulation, because my fundamental concern is by adding this voice, are we duplicating? We have a lot of voices at committee of the whole meetings. I don't know how we stop. Maybe we don't want to. Arts advisory and alternative schools advisory, everybody else from jumping on COW. So I think that we have to establish criterial thresholds. One of my concerns has been the duplication of mandate. I get the, more the merrier, more parent voices, the better kind of thing. But the mandates are largely duplicative as I see it, in at least a formal way. In an informal way, as I understand it, OCASC is different in that it brings matters of school council or parent interest to the board, which lie outside of parent engagement questions. Whereas the PIC's formal mandate is limited to parent engagement. One can say they don't like the regulation. Lots of regulations I don't like either. I'd like to go beyond regulations when I feel like it. But on the other hand, the PIC is required as an arm of the ministry and the board to provide communications to parents and school councils, which OCASC is not, because it's an independent body. So there are some mandate differences, but there is large mandate overlap. I think from a practical perspective, as I understand it, they do differ. Because I think without, with due respect, I'm not sure that OCASC is actually actioning all aspects of its constitution. I'm not sure that the PIC is actually actioning all aspects of its current bylaws. So I think what I'd like to do is welcome the PIC, though I do worry about what I see as a breathtaking overreach of mandate assertion on their part, as on the basis of an additional voice, I guess, indistinctly understood, but look in the future to really discussing this matter and settling it, not sort of on the fly, sort of ambush discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Campbell. And moving on to Ms. Lamba.
Yeah, I just have some questions. So I thought I heard the trustee say that the PIC members actually wanted both of them on COW, and that's actually what they wanted. So doesn't this addition seem contrary to what happened at the meeting? Like I'm confused how you can add something that the report in itself didn't want, or maybe I missed it. Can someone explain that to me, please?
Madam Director.
Yes, Chair. I think it's important to make a distinction here about what's being discussed. I think one of the things that it needs to be clarified is that the decision of who sits as a non-voting member at the committee of the whole table is actually the decision of the Board of Trustees. So the Board of Trustees not necessarily about how it is that PIC feels about decisions about other things, but there has been a motion to bring forward PIC to sit on the as a committee as a non-voting member of the committee of the whole. It is the purview of the trustees to discuss whether or not that has implications for other aspects of the committee of the whole and the members, the non-voting members that sit within, because that is guided by the policy as well as the bylaws of the Board of Trustees. So it isn't. It's important to just clarify that this is not about dismantling OCASC, or this is not about what it is that that PIC has wanted, when it is that there is a motion that comes forward from the advisory committees, it is the purview of the Board of Trustees to discuss it and move it and either approve it or not. So that's the point of clarification, because I kind of feel like this conversation is drifting away from what the actual decision point is.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make the one point that I wanted to make, just being an observer, not being a trustee, is just that I think there is a little bit of unfairness to put this here without giving the proper opportunity for a group who's going to be removed from this committee to be able to properly prepare and defend itself as to why it should be there. I did see the attempt in that, but for me, this is a sense of unfairness, whatever decision you make on this point. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And moving on to Trustee Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be supporting this amendment or sub-amendment. There is, and it's been articulated, Trustee Campbell brought up the mandates of the two different groups. I was a participant for many years, treasurer at OCAS before becoming a trustee, so I have a bit of a bias there. But I also sat and worked on the first term of reference for PIC. They are two different, as Trustee Campbell noted in their mandates. And, you know, I think back to when the board was taken over by the province during the Harris years, how, and of course the supervisor dismissed OCAS, but they still brought their voice forward. They were a rallying cry to move issues forward. A PIC under a board supervision, because PIC is a provincial creature, could be totally put out of the picture if the board were to be taken over. That's a worst case scenario. But I do think that the, you know, it was mentioned, someone brought up that there are a number of schools that don't have a school council. And so OCAS isn't as representative as they could be, but that's not OCAS's fault. That's the board's fault, and to some extent, PIC's fault, that they haven't been able to engage parents to become to the school council. I'm only pointing that out, bringing that up, that the two organizations function differently and will bring different voices. I think we would have a richer discussion. It would be a richer understanding to have both voices at the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Ellis. And moving on to Trustee Lyra.
All right. I'm not going to be supporting this amendment. As a school district, we spend piles of money and dozens, if not hundreds, of staff hours on parent and community consultation and engagement. And we have volunteers who are willing to spend the hours each week reading the prep for the committee of the whole meetings, and then the hours sitting through these meetings, completely volunteer. And we are saying that we're going to remove these people. I think it goes contrary to our goals of community engagement. I think it goes contrary to our goals of trying to get as many voices as possible around the table. I liked what I think it was Rob was talking about earlier. We should be having conversations about, should the Arts Committee have a seat around this table? Who else can we have around this table? We should be trying to get as many voices as possible heard in our committee structure, because we want to hear those voices. I don't support removing people from this committee. And so I'm going to be voting against this amendment, and I would encourage all of my colleagues to do the same.
Thank you very much, Trustee Lyra. Moving on to, I saw that Trustee Blackburn did have her hand up.
Down, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Trustee Fisher, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Appreciate the discussion tonight. I think, you know, my response to this issue is sort of twofold. First, you know, I agree 100% with the director. You know, we decide who we want sitting around the table, ultimately who we want to engage and collaborate with as part of the committee of the whole. And if we want to include another voice being PIC or others, I think that that's our choice. I think that's really the issue that we should be discussing and debating. You know, and then second, for me, if both PIC and OCASC or the school councils, I think were, you know, properly and fully fulfilling their mandates, you know, I think they provide important but different contributions to the discussion. You know, PIC on the one hand, you know, is able to provide a much broader discussion and insight from a parent's perspective with respect to student achievement and student well-being. And I think that's an important contribution to the discussion. You know, on the other hand, as it relates to OCASC, and while I, you know, certainly believe that, you know, school councils should be achieving this mandate more fully, you know, school councils provide an important perspective as it relates to, you know, what's going on in schools, school performance, student, you know, school improvement planning, you know, all of those different issues. You know, that's a perspective that if it's working right is very different than what PIC can do and PIC offers. So I think having them both there will only serve us well, you know, as a board of trustees, because we're getting, you know, different perspectives, different insights, and in some respects at different levels of the organization. And so I don't support, you know, a motion that would remove OCASC from the conversation, even though I don't think it's fully fulfilling its mandate, at least at the individual school council level. I do think that there are important perspectives that they can provide. So as it stands right now, I can't support the motion as it's written. And I think we should seriously be considering adding more voices, not fewer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're moving to Trustee Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And getting back to the main topic here, which is how many representatives do we want and who do we want at the committee of the whole table? As trustees, we are elected, each of us, to represent everybody. So we already have a role in supporting the school communities and the parents in our own communities and across the district. We have a number of other committees, advisory committees, which include multiple parent voices. We have ACE, we have IAC, we have the Early Learning Committee, and SEAC, and those are other places where we have representation of parent voices. And they come together, they meet, they discuss things, and there is diverse representation on all of those, just that ensures that there is a very broad view coming forward from each of those other advisory committees. In the case of PIC also includes representatives from OCASC as its members. And one of the possibilities is that we could end up, if we have both on, we could end up with having an OCASC representative, and we could also have an OCASC representative from PIC. In other words, two voices basically from OCASC rather than one. And I think that is one of the concerns that I have is with the duplication of mandates, because both of them are out there to support, encourage, and enhance parent engagement to improve student achievement and well-being. Both of them are supposedly communicating with and supporting school councils of schools of the board. And the fact that the PIC is a statutory committee of the board, it's nonetheless does have the opportunity to set its own bylaws. And I note that even though the school board is under supervision, their PIC is continuing to meet very regularly, present reports, and be heard. So from that point of view, I think it comes down to how do we manage our meetings and how many people do we really want around the table, given that we have multiple layers bringing us up to the things that happen at Committee of the Whole. We are having a great deal of difficulty sometimes managing to have discussions and debates in a timely way because we have so many voices. We can't really hear all of them properly and still get into the depth of the issue in a way that would benefit our decision making. So I will be supporting the amendment.
Thank you very much, Trustee Scott. And Trustee Blackburn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I will also be supporting the amendment, and I'm saying this as somebody who, before she was elected as a trustee, sat on the executive of OCASC and was a very active member of OCASC, and actually as a member of OCASC sat on 3 committees of the board, not including a seat at Committee of the Whole. I know it's politically expedient to say yes to everybody, but it's not, from a good governance perspective, in my personal opinion, a good thing to be doing. We as a board, and I want to hear everybody's voice, and I think as a board, we have the opportunity to hear people's voices there. And as Trustee Scott spoke about, OCASC has 2 seats on PIC, whereas other groups don't have 2 seats, they have 1. And so, as she stated, we could have 2 OCASC reps sitting at the table. We are struggling. We are struggling as a board to get through our agendas. And you know what, like somebody said, are we going to, the next time somebody asks for representation on COW, we're just going to keep adding and adding and adding? And then I guess we'll have to revisit Trustees Campbell's motion to sit past 11 o'clock, because we're doing that, you know, we're sitting to 11 o'clock and we're not finishing our agendas. And this board provides ample opportunity for people to express their views to us. And I just don't see how, and as has been stated, PIC is the statutory committee. It's what every other district in the province does. And I do appreciate the work of OCASC. I do continue from time to time to attend their meetings, and I think it's great that they exist. But I think it's time to move on and to put PIC in our meetings and not add another seat, especially when we might end up with 2 OCASC people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Trustee Blackbird and Trustee Lyra.
I've heard a number of people have had concerns that we might end up with 2 people from OCASC, 1 sitting in the PIC seat. I have a question to the executive officer. Is it possible to amend this such that we can ensure that the person who is the PIC representative does not come from one of the OCASC seats on PIC?
It's possible. You'd have to specify the something in the language. I'd have to give some thought to the right wording, but yes, you could make a sub amendment to that effect.
Okay. I will wait on making that amendment. If this passes, I will look to you for language to come back at board. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lyra. And Ms. Mullison?
Mr. Chair, have you called the question yet? I lost my connection. Sorry about that.
No, we have not. We're on some second time speakers, Chair, Trustee Scott. Go ahead, Ms. Mullison.
Thank you. With concern of having two people speaking, with concern of having two people on behalf of OCASC speaking at COW, it would be very easy for us to ensure that whatever parent we have representing us at PIC not be allowed to be the COW rep. We can easily make it so that they are allowed to attend meetings and yet not be the representative that sits at the COW table for PIC. Being there and attending the meetings is one thing, but they don't necessarily have to be there so that we don't duplicate and make sure that we're not duplicating in that capacity. That's something we can easily do as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mullison. Trustee Schwartz?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to call the question.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion to end debate. And it is, since I see no further hands, Trustee Schwartz, is it simpler just to simply go to Trustee Boothby for wrap up? Okay, so Trustee
Yeah,
Boothby.
go ahead then.
Trustee Boothby, go ahead with your wrap up.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the discussion. I'll just wrap up by saying, so first of all, OCASC has committee members on more than PIC. They for sure have a committee member on SEAC, and I suspect they also do on other committees like ACE. So it's more far reaching than just the PIC committee. As I said at the beginning, I think there's an awful lot of duplication in these two committees. And OCASC, as I have said, they sit at many of our committees, and through their own constitution and their own mandate, they sit at other committees. So that's an easy way for their representation to come up through the board, because as has been stated, we would have PIC at the committee, we would have ACE at the committee, we would have the Indigenous Education Advisory at the committee. So there are plenty of avenues to get that additional parent voice, but I'm concerned that we could very easily get competing voices out of PIC and OCASC, and we could end up with more than one OCASC member because they are prominent on other committees. So I think it is more fair to the committee of the board to have very distinct mandates for the people that are sitting around that table. And I can't see that there is that much distinction between these two committees. And I think of the two of the committees, the more broad representation of our board is through PIC. So I urge my colleagues to vote for the amendment. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to call the question. Just get my sheet of paper out here so I can record it down. All those in favor of the amendment? And I guess this is substantial enough that you should probably say your name.
Boothby in favor.
Scott in favor.
Schwartz in favor.
Huff in favor.
Jannekins in favor.
Penny in favor. And opposed?
Fisher opposed.
Bell opposed.
Ellis
Ira
opposed.
opposed.
Campbell opposed.
Abstentions?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if we got a clear vote from Trustee Ellis.
Wait, sorry, I was on mute. I'm in favor of the amendment.
Thank you very much. So I have 7 in favor of the amendment and 5 opposed. So the amendment passes. And we're going back to the main motion. And I do have a list from previously of Ms. Mullison, Trustee Bell, Trustee Huff, and Trustee Blackburn that I preserved from previously. So Ms. Mullison, did you want to comment on the main motion as it is amended? You're muted.
I think that it's a grave mistake to remove OCASC. I think that you are canceling out a huge opportunity to have extra voices at this table. I think you're going to hear from a lot of parents very quickly, especially how this went down so quickly, and really not consulting with people at all about this. You talk about parent engagement, you talk about consultation, you talk about how you want to reach out to people, you talk about how you want to reach a broader audience. Here's your opportunity. It's sitting right in front of you, and you're taking it and you're throwing it away. You're literally throwing out an extra voice of the people you're trying to engage with the most. You're talking about how you want parents here and you want parents to be engaged. And what you're going to do is eliminate a spot where they can actually go and speak to people in real time at meetings in real time. And you're going to send them to a place where they can maybe delegate for 2 minutes, maybe in a forum that's foreign to most people that they're not comfortable with, and on topics that are pre-dictated to them that they can address. You're cutting out access to so many people. You're cutting out access to the board, to information. You're cutting out access and equity to so many different groups of parents. You have an opportunity here to branch open to more people. You can't sit there and say that you talk about how you're encouraging engagement, and you talked about how you reached out to every grade 8 student and how you were able to do that. That's great. But now you've got the opportunity to be able to be broadly engaged, and you're throwing it away. Take time and think about this. Think about the opportunity you have, how many more parents you can reach, how many more groups you can reach, how many more faces you can have involved, and how many more ears you'll have, and eyes you'll have, and ideas you'll have. You're choosing to go with a group that is selected versus a group that's open to the public. That's really unfortunate. You have an opportunity here and you're squandering it. I hope you don't squander it. I hope you change your mind, and I hope you really think about this. I know that there's going to be people who come out and people who are going to speak out about this. And I'm hoping that these people can show you just what these voices can do, and show you the engagement that we have, and show you the voice that we have, because I'm really disappointed that this is the way you're going. And I know that the whole membership and even those that just attend are extremely disappointed that this is how you went. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mullison. And just remind everyone that we're debating the motion. The amendment has already passed. So if you could try to keep your comments germane to the motion, I would appreciate it. And we have Trustee Campbell, you did raise a point of order, but you have your hand up, and I'm assuming you wanted to speak on the main motion.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
Please. Thank you. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So go ahead.
Oh, it is to me. Okay, great. Sorry, didn't catch that. Okay, thank you. So here's the thing. I guess I was willing to, and I'll listen to the debate, but I was willing to sort of hold my nose and say, sure, more the merrier, bring on the pick. But my concern continues to be the mandate. So if, as I understand it at this time, folks are considering that the pick or are we saying, I have to ask my colleagues, and maybe it's a question to staff actually. Under the regulation and the PIC bylaws, their role is not to represent the interests of parents on all issues to the board. It's simply not. It's not there. You can invent it if you want, but it's not there. So I guess the question is, what I've heard is what seems to me to be a breathtaking overreach with respect to how they're asserting their mandate, which is not supported by anything. And I can assert anything I want if people let me get away with it, and I guess I'm done. But so it is a question to staff. Is there legislative support for the very broad mandate, not just advising with respect to, but saying that we represent all parents, all interests? And I guess I'd like a staff comment, because we need to know what it is we're expecting out of the PIC when and if they arrive at COW. Thank you.
Madam Director.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So I think that there are a couple of things that have not necessarily been captured in some of the discussion, and the trustee has identified, well, what is the written mandate of the PIC per its establishment by regulation through the Ministry of Education, and it is articulated as representation of parent voice and parent engagement pertaining to student achievement and well-being. So school issues, issues around programming, issues around school experience, notions of parents may be raising about, a variety of things that impact the students in general in terms of their engagement towards successful outcomes at school. I would add, as a part of the definition of understanding, is what does a ministry mean when it says parent engagement? And parent engagement is in fact defined by a parent engagement policy that was established in 2010 by the Ministry of Education, and it was established on the flip side, as the other side of the coin, as of equity and community engagement. So when you look at the mandate around 2009, when the equity strategy came out, 2010 parent engagement strategy policy came out, and that defines the role. As for where it is that parents and families get to speak about anything and bring any concerns forward, we have no limits on that in our district, from the point of view that our district, unlike many other districts, have more representation of voice than probably any district in the province, in that there has been a formalized seat that has been created at Committee of the Whole, and we shouldn't underrate and undermine the value of the multiple advisory committees that have been established in a formalized way that represent different perspectives of not just community members or families and parents, but also community members that represent families and members. And so it's been brought up more than once that we have IAC, we have CIAC, we have ACE, we have a number of structures there. So to suggest that parent voice and family voice is limited is probably not appropriate. The last thing that I would add to that, just to be clear about where it is that we are making decisions, is that when we think about the whole idea of grassroots, there are lots of grassroots members or organizations as a part of our district, some which have a formalized recognition from the point of view of being there a long time. And I would caution around worrying about thinking about historical structures that that have privilege over newly formed structures, because we do have newly formed structures that represent a variety and range of community voice that haven't even been contemplated by this table, because I would submit, if you were going to contemplate everybody, then it would be a question of whether this meeting is truly a business meeting or whether it's a town hall. And so that is something else for contemplation as you think about who it is that is selected to represent in a non-voting capacity. I hope that helps, Trustee Campbell.
It does. It goes beyond as well. Between now and board, could I ask if staff provide me a detailed reference with respect to the regulation that supports these comments, because I don't find that support in the regulation in terms of a representative role with respect to all parents, all interests. Yeah, that's the thing. I simply don't find that supported, that interpretation supported. So I would like that detailed if I could get that. So I guess from my perspective, just going back to the main motion, sort of, willing to sort of wince because of my mandate concerns here and supporting the regulation concerns, sort of wince and say, okay, sure, bring on another. But I think that the idea that we would remove OCASC is now doubly wounding to me of the overall motion. It's not a move I was expecting, to be honest. I think that we should be debating these things with lots of debate, and as I think has been mentioned, community input and everything else. So I'm really sort of taken aback and aghast that we do this, sort of like backdoor operation or something. So this to me now is doubly wounded as a motion.
Campbell, do you want me
Yes.
to put you back on the list as a second time speaker?
No, that's good. I'll listen, but I'm negatively disposed right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Trustee Bell.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I have so many questions, and I would have loved to have had some sort of memorandum from the board in advance about addressing things like, how does PIC consult with parents? How does it reach out to school councils? I have a number of questions, and I think outlining those regulations that Trustee Campbell has also questioned as well. It would be really great to get those in advance of having a discussion like this. I think if possible, I would like to put on the table that we defer this conversation until we have the information that's needed. And so I would like to defer it until the next COW, which would give parents who are involved and PIC who voted against the amendment time to discuss and to come up with a recommendation regarding what we're trying to vote on and determine. So I would like to move that we defer this until the next COW.
Okay, so there's a motion to defer, and I think it's
I'm just on the call right now, okay?
executive officer. Is that debatable as to time and place?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't hear you. Was it clarification on the rules for deferral?
Yes, is it only debatable as to time and place?
Yes.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor from Trustee Bell. I believe she's given her introduction as far as what she wants to do and why. And she is proposing that we defer the motion until the next committee of the whole meeting. And that will not be until December, first part of December. And so is there any debate on the time and place on that? Trustee Fisher?
No, sorry, Keith, I had my hand up for the original motion, not the deferral.
Okay, and so all those with no further debate, did you want any closing comments, Trustee Bell? All those in favor then of deferring this motion until the next committee of the whole meeting?
Ellis in favor.
Fisher in favor.
Lyra in favor.
Jennings in favor.
Bell in favor.
Campbell in favor.
Huff in favor.
Scott in favor.
Boothby in favor.
Penny in favor. And opposed?
Blackburn in favor.
And seeing no opposed, the item is deferred until the next committee of the whole meeting, and we'll take it under advisement at the Agenda Planning Committee to schedule that. Okay, it is 8:50. So what I would propose, if we could, there is a few more items. So if we could take a quick break to 9 o'clock, I would appreciate that. So I want to see all the trustees back here at 9 o'clock. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I just want to see if we have quorum. And it looks like we do have quorum, so thank you very much, and we're back. And we're moving on in our agenda to item 7.3, Audit Committee. And I'd like to call for a mover to receive the Audit Committee report of October 20th, 2021. Trustee Fisher, thank you very much. And are there any errors and or omissions on that report? And seeing none, I'd like to call the question on receipt of that report. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you very much. And I note that in the audit report, there are some recommendations in the audit committee report. So Trustee Fisher, would you like to introduce those?
Yes, thanks, Keith. There's a recommendation 7.3A, which I believe will be moved by Trustee Jenkins.
Trustee Jenkins? Trustee Jenkins? You're muted, Trustee Jenkins, I'm sorry.
Sorry, that good old mute button. And sorry, I'm just looking for the motion.
I can read it for you. The motion
Yep,
reads
thanks.
as that the Appendix A to Report 21-063 be approved as the 2020-2021 Annual Report of Internal Audit Activity.
Thank you very much. And for this recommendation, do you have any introduction, Trustee Jenkins?
No, I don't.
Thank you very much. Is there any debate on this this report? And seeing no hands, do you have any closing remarks, Trustee Jenkins?
No, I think it's explanatory.
No problem. And so I'd like to call the question. All those in favor of approving the report, the annual report on internal audit activity, all those in favor?
Fisher in favor.
Ellis in favor.
Campbell in favor.
Fire in favor.
Up in favor.
Jenkins in favor.
Schwartz in favor.
Scott in favor.
Bell in
Okay.
favor.
Any in favor? And opposed? And that passes. And I see there's still a couple hands up. Are those just
Vestigial.
this? Okay. And was there an additional report, Trustee Fisher?
There was, Keith. There's another recommendation, 7.3B, which was originally moved by Shannon Huft, one of our external members, which I'll move in substitution. And the recommendation reads as follows: that report 21-064 be approved as the Audit Committee Annual Report to the Board for 2020-2021.
Thank you very much. Is there any debate on the report? And seeing no debate, did you need any closing remarks, Trustee Fisher?
None required.
No problem. And I'd like to call the question on that. All those in favor of approving that report?
Fisher in favor.
Up in favor.
In favor.
Lyra in favor.
Campbell in favor.
Jenkins in favor.
Schwartz in favor.
Scott in favor.
Blackburn in
Bell in favor.
Any in favor? And opposed? And none opposed. So thank you very much. That passes and is approved. No further recommendations, Trustee Fisher?
That's correct, Keith.
Thank you very much. Moving on in our agenda then to item 7.4, the IAC committee report of October 21st. I'd like to call for a mover to receive that report. Trustee Huff, thank you very much. Are there any errors and or omissions? And seeing none, I'd like to call the question on that report. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you very much, and that passes. Moving on in our agenda to item 8, matters for discussion. Item 8.1, report 21-078, update on progress 2019-2023 strategic plan. I'd like to call upon the director to introduce that report.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Tonight's report provides trustees with an update on our implementation of strategic actions to advance the goals that have been identified in our 2019 to 2023 strategic plan. The strategic plan identifies a vision around how culture enables our system to grow in innovation, exemplify care, and advance social responsibility. When you look at the charts that are attached to the report, it's clear that we've continued to do significant work as a team. It's important also that we recognize that some of the committed actions have been slowed down, delayed, or deferred because, of course, of the impact of the pandemic. Importance also to note that even in the presence of the pandemic, where it is that we have departed from some of our strategic actions, that the decisions that we had to make during a pandemic response pertaining to operations within this time frame were influenced and informed by the directions of the strategic plan around our commitment to innovation, care, and social responsibility. At this point, I'm going to ask our strategic business analyst, Dr. Andrea Rahim, to start us off with PowerPoint, just kind of giving some broad strokes around the process that we've undertaken to review where we are with our plan. And then I will highlight some key achievements because, as you could see, the charts that are attached are very, very robust. And what we want to do is leave a lot of time for trustees to focus in on areas where they may have questions. And we have most members of the senior team here with us that maybe we're able to respond to questions as they arise. So over to you, Dr. Rahim.
Thank you so much. So as Director Williams-Taylor mentioned, this is the update on year 2 of the strategic plan. So stepping back a little bit, the strategic plan being our 4-year vision for 2019 to 2023. And to achieve that vision, we developed these annual strategic action plans with specific action items to drive the work forward. And so this update will be reflecting on the work over the 2020 to 2021 school year. But we'll start with a brief overview of the strat plan and the 3 priority areas: culture of innovation, a culture of caring, and a culture of social responsibility. So on the next slide, we'll start with culture of innovation, where the objective is to build a learning community where innovation and inquiry drive learning. So there are 3 identified goals, one for each student, staff, and the system. And these are to champion high learning expectations for all students in all programs, promote collaborative environments which foster innovation and creativity, and to modernize instruction and administrative practices or processes. On the next slide, culture of caring. The objective is to advance equity and a sense of belonging to promote a safe and caring community. The goals are to prioritize the dignity and well-being of students in inclusive and caring classrooms, champion and nurture a safe and caring and respectful workplace, and build authentic engagement with and among our communities. And finally, culture of social responsibility, where the objective is to strengthen our community through ethical leadership, equitable practice, and responsible stewardship. The goals are to remove barriers to equity of access, opportunity, and outcomes, model responsive and ethical leadership and accountability, and foster progressive stewardship of the environment and human and financial resources. Within the strategic plan, there are outlined desired outcomes for students, staff, and the system. So for example, some of those outcomes for students include increased student achievement, well-being, and engagement. For staff, some of those examples include increased well-being, engagement, and leadership capacity. And for the system, we look at things like improved business processes, increased parent voice, and improved governance. The strategic plan also identifies specific strategies and key performance indicators. And as the director mentioned, given the impacts of COVID, we've had to revisit some of these. In some cases, there are strategies and/or KPIs that we've previously identified that are no longer relevant or no longer available. And in other cases, we've seen new opportunities for strategic moves and for measurement that have come to light that we'll be following throughout the course of the plan. But this focused strategic plan has really helped us stay the course during these challenging times. We've clearly identified priorities in the areas of innovation, care, and social responsibility. So as mentioned, this update is based on year 2 of the strategic plan. So being at the midpoint, this update is focused on the implementation of the strategies. In years 3 and 4, we'll shift in focus to look at the impacts on practices and on outcomes. And in addition, throughout the plan, and as seen in the tracker attached as an appendix, you'll see reflection on the structures that are identified for sustaining practice. In implementing the strategic plan, we've undertaken many initiatives this year. So I'll pass it back to Director Williams-Taylor to walk us through some of the highlights of that key work.
Thank you, Dr. Rahim. So when we look at highlights, and you will see that again, the attachments are quite robust in terms of very specific items and indicating, of course, what moves have been made to not just implement, but to ensure that there's an architecture for sustained change. So some of the key pieces, and we have referenced many times the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap, because one of the key pieces is that in several places of our strategic plan, we talk about not just advancing equity, but we also talk about some key principles of equity that reside in several areas of the strategic plan. So we have in fact created a strategic roadmap to help us to deliver on those promises. And we need to really not undervalue the importance of implementation of tactics, because tactics make the steps to strategy work. And so creating a roadmap like this certainly gives an accountability and a transparency to the deliverables that are required to get to some of these changes that we want to see. Some of the pieces that go to the sustainability are some of the policy pieces and procedure pieces that have come into play to ensure that some of the moves that are being made are in fact enshrined in sustained guidance for the system. Some of the other projects that are here have been identified. We've heard a lot about the identity-based data collection. We've had reports here on that. That is a deliverable from the point of implementation. It has been done, but the question becomes how then that informs some of our key moves around changing outcomes to create equity and ensure high expectations and outcomes for all students. And the de-streaming piece is another piece that's there. Not highlighted here, and I do want to highlight this out loud, is the succession planning work, succession planning and leadership development work that has been undertaken to this point. And we are now on the cusp of creating some direction for that with the moves that have already been taken in 1920 and 2021. So those are some of the key pieces there before you. And again, many of you will have looked at the package that you would have received with much more detail in there. But all this to say, and it's really important to emphasize that much of this work has been undertaken and advanced in the shadow of some very challenging decisions that have been made. Some were made for us from external sources that have created divergence from some of the work that we wanted to undertake. And those obstacles or side roads, if you will, have slowed down some of the work that we wanted to undertake. But we do anticipate going into next year and our final year and starting to measure where it is that some of this implementation is taking hold and making changes in the experiences that our students, staffs, and community are experiencing as a part of our district's work. So with that, I will stop there and turn it to trustees should you have questions of myself or the rest of the staff.
And we do have a question from Trustee Campbell.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the update. Hotly anticipating this for some time. And it's great to see all the very creative actions that staff are undertaking to move forward on things. And we've had a number of related reports recently along these lines as well, but it's a good time to take stock. In terms of the, I do have a question. It's born of a little bit of a concern. In terms of the idea of sort of pivoting to different KPIs, I understand the difference between perhaps KPIs and outcomes. And from reading the report and listening to the intro, I gather maybe not this year because we're missing EQAO and that kind of thing. But presumably in years 3 and 4, we will have access to that kind of information. Do I understand that what staff are suggesting is that at this time, in due to COVID and sort of the midway point, we maybe can't provide interim measure updates on some bases, simply don't have the information, may be inappropriate, but that it is currently still our expectation that we will be able to report on some of these bases in forthcoming years. Is that my understanding? Or?
Yes, Trustee Campbell, is really important. The data piece is a very important factor, especially as we get into year 3 and year 4. And so, yes, indeed, there's an expectation that we will be looking at those pieces. The question that it begs, however, is what does that data mean in a changed environment? So, for example, when we look at OSSLT or EQA outcomes as a whole, which is a key measure that we look at, what does that mean? What it looks like now for us as we undertake that when EQAO does come back on the table. We have children who have experienced 2 years of a very different school environment where the nature of the implementation of instruction is different. So will we be able to then to attribute some of the outcomes to the actual implementation of practice when it is that the conditions for learning have been so impacted? It doesn't mean we wouldn't collect and report on that information, but we would have to think about how it is that that information, that data can be connected to the actual work that has been undertaken, which is why we would have collected it in the first place. So we do need to think about where it is that what it is we want to report on. The other piece is that as we have undertaken some of this work, we've learned more about what data means. And when we think about some of the benchmarks that we first collected, the question does become when it is you collect the next set of data, and how is it that we're able to collect in a way that actually comments on our deliverables, so that it is in fact a result of the work that we're seeing a shift in the needle, and not just by coincidence or just not simply reporting data in a void. So we do look at how it is that we're going to be doing. We're very concerned about that. We're concerned about what data in fact it will speak to the impact that this work has had, and how it is we continue to collect that data, because I would submit to you that in this very dysfunctional time, if you will, the data that we receive in a year or 2 years from now will be somewhat skewed. It will be more dependable when we take that data again in 2 more years, that we would be able then to make some reasonable connection between our practice, our work, and the impact demonstrated by the data that we collect.
Thank you very much. I guess just from my perspective, I very much appreciate that. And I fully agree for what that's worth. But I think there is still value in collecting that, maybe not reporting on that anytime soon because of some of the things that have been suggested. But I mean, any stats, come with a narrative, and staff are always very good about that. So I think in subsequent years, I mean, I could forecast their narrative, may say COVID, right? And so I think that's easily understood, because I think that I mean, if there's been a dip, let's say in achievement and certain demographics, or maybe harder hit and all these kinds of things, then we need to recognize that, we need to own that, we need to develop strategies to fix that. And that's good input for a forthcoming board mandate and a forthcoming strat plan. Is if achievement gains have been weak the previous strat plan, does that become something the forthcoming board doubles down on? So I think there are reasons to continue to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
As long as there's a good narrative attached to it. I only have 30 seconds. Maybe I can do this. The suggested questions in the report also suggested, asked for, maybe areas where we needed to do more work. And I think there are several of them. I won't go through the list, or at least I'd like to see some PKIs or something around them. Do we have increased staff well-being? My guess is probably not. I think there are probably a whole bunch of indicators in there, which I think we have to look at, and I'm not sure we've improved. Again, due to extraneous factors, most likely. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Campbell. Moving on to Trustee Fisher.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. And I think in many ways I share Rob's interest and enthusiasm. I think looking at that list that was provided, the appendix that was provided, it certainly demonstrates that even during a pandemic, we've been extremely busy. I think a lot of that work has been a continuation of things that were started, a few years ago, which is good. And we've been able to maintain some of that work and that continuity. As you've heard me say before, I do think that we are starting to become a data-rich organization. And I think that that's great for developing insights and ultimately develop knowledge that will help us make better decisions, particularly as it relates to student well-being and achievement, but also, with respect to our employees and how do we become a top employer? How do we become a sustainable organization? I do worry, though, that as we become a data-rich organization, that we sort of get stuck in analysis paralysis, and that does worry me a little bit, because we have been talking about some of these things for a while now. Particularly the intersectionality of socioeconomic data, and so that's just a word of caution. I think that happens to every data-rich organization. And ultimately, when I looked at that chart, the one thing that I really struggle with is, what was our baseline? What was our starting point? What have we put in place? What have we put in motion that has really started to move us towards a different benchmark, a comparable as it relates to our other boards? What kind of a target above that benchmark are we striving for, let's say in terms of student achievement, or and then how do we measure performance along the way? When I looked at that chart, I saw a lot of stuff, right? But it's not clear to me about where we are in the journey and the end point, and sort of what was the starting point to see if are we on track or are we off track? Do we need to adjust somewhere? That was really hard for me to get from that table of really, really good stuff, right? And so that's just one reflection that I would have, sort of way up here as a strategic oversight level, right? Is really just trying to understand at that 50,000 foot level, sort of where are we on our journey, and where do we need to push harder to get to where we need to go. And so those are some overarching reflections for me. And then ultimately, I think just to close is, how do we take this great work and ensure that it is infusing, and I'm going to use old terminology, but our board improvement plan, our school improvement plans, how do we make sure that this is being driven from the top down and from the bottom up in everything that we do? And I'm sure that that's happening, but I don't necessarily always see it at the school level, right? Just making sure that, again, back to our school council conversations, that when they're sitting at the table talking about school performance and student achievement, student well-being, they're talking about the same things that we're talking about, but where they're doing it in a school context, right? And I'm not sure I'm seeing those conversations happening, which kind of leads me to think that there might be a disconnect, maybe not between principals and vice principals and teachers, but maybe the employees in our schools and our parent community. So I think the final thought I have is, how are we connecting this from the top to the bottom and from the bottom to the top? Because that's really where I think we'll see that transformational change happen. And so those are just some overarching reflections for me. It's a lot of great work, and I hope that we're able to continue pushing it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Fisher. Is there anyone else that wishes to comment on the report? Trustee Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's really great to see the whole list sort of spread out in front of us. There are a lot of highlights here. One thing that I don't think comes through as clearly as it probably should is the impact that COVID has had on innovation in general, not just in terms of the strategic actions that are listed here. One thing that has really advanced this year is the nature and quantity of communications. The reference to student voice and the communications that are going out to students, that students are getting their own regular updates outlining things that are of particular significance for them and what they do, but also providing them some of the bigger picture pieces for their consideration has been really important. But what we're not referencing there is the extent and nature of parent communications, because we never used to have parent communications that went out regularly to all parents. And now we do. And that, I think, is making a huge difference, not just in terms of providing them with useful day-to-day information about things that are happening, but also in terms of looking at the broader things. The nature of our consultation processes has changed. And with the use of technology, we've been able to bring in a much bigger set of voices and a much greater number of much greater diversity of voices. We had some of that with using thought exchange, but the focus groups and town halls and other kinds of consultative meetings have, I think, really made a difference in the ability of the community to understand some of the things that we're doing and to respond to some of the things that we're doing in a much more pointed and some very pointed way when they know what is going on and what we're thinking about doing. And I see that reflected as well in the schools, in the school newsletters. Again, a similar scope, smaller scale, but it still is looking at a lot of the pieces around the strategic plan and connecting those ideas so that parents can actually see what's happening. The trouble with the school system is that any of the innovations we introduce now, we won't necessarily see the results of those for our kindergarten kids, 14 years. And so assessing targets and planning targets is a bit of a challenge within the education area, particularly because we don't have the luxury of having control groups to compare with. And I'll just stop there.
Thank you very much, Trustee Scott. Moving on to Trustee Bell.
Looking at the clock, I'll be quick. I really appreciate this overview and seeing it all on computer. I want to say paper. My question through you, Chair, to the director is, I understand that you said there were some distractions. You didn't go into those, but I'm just trying to think about all that we've been able to accomplish. What more would you like to have seen us accomplish? What I guess in that period, and do you foresee in future those types of distractions continuing to distract us from meeting our objectives?
Thank you, Trustee Bell, and through you, Chair. Certainly that's a question that would probably require an entire evening for discussion. So I won't do that, but I will try to be succinct. When we think about some of the things that we did have to put our minds to around reconfiguring program delivery, reconfiguring so many structures that for a system of almost 75,000 students, and over time monitoring those changes, and it's the same group of people who are doing that work. Certainly there were things that we could no longer invest in. One of the specific things that certainly was a bit of a disappointment in not being able to advance well is the revisioning, redeveloping, and re-implementation of the board improvement and school improvement plan for student achievement and well-being. We saw that is identified as a key action. It is a key action around setting targets, around high expectations. And so we were not able to deliver on that because of some of the interruptions. And we have indeed turned our minds back to it. And we have now gotten a different ministry direction around that. So we are essentially back to square one with some of the work that we are undertaking there. Similarly, some of the review processes that we were expecting to undertake pertaining to our student services. That's one of the other challenges that we have not been able to do is the operational review of LSS, simply because, again, some of those interruptions. Those things are important because they are the precursors to a different outcome for students. And so in order to move to the outcomes that we want to see, the architecture has to be put into place, and having the time to and the will and the direction to be able to do that certainly has been waylaid. So those are two examples that I can provide of a very robust a group of things here. But when I say that distractions have taken us into a different direction, those are two examples of what I'm speaking of.
Great. And just one quick follow-up. We discussed last time that we met the possibility of undertaking a program review of sorts. I'm just curious how that would fit into the plan that we're looking at today.
Thanks, Trustee Bell. And so that is an example of a direction that is not articulated here. And so I do recall that when that was raised in our discussion the last time, in the last committee of the whole, where that item was discussed, I talked about thousands of hours, and I wasn't exaggerating. And so when we start to talk about that, it certainly does fit within some of the guidance that is identified in the strategic plan around equitable outcomes. So when we talk about de-streaming and we talk about how it is that de-streaming might be one tactic, that a bigger strategic picture might be looking at the entire framework of streamed practices, then there would need to be an acceptance that will then cause us to take, if you will, and people have heard me use the term, a left turn from some of the directions that have been undertaken already, put them on hold, put them on ice, to do that. Perhaps well-intended and with a better outcome that is a bigger, longer lasting, more strategic impact, but with acceptance that with doing that, we're then going to step away from some of the other commitments in order to do that. And it may well be worthwhile, but it does beg some questions about what the appetite is for the kinds of decisions that would be required at the outcome of a discussion like that. We talked about parent engagement and family voices. We know that in our district, like many other districts, there are voices that are stronger than others, and there are undertakings that if we were going to make a change, there would be lineups of people who have different perspectives. And so it would be, we have to weigh where it is we want to invest our time, and if we have the fortitude to move ahead with the kind of changes that would be unpopular in the best interest of outcomes for the larger population of students. So, you know, I know that I'm inserting some additional pieces here beyond what you've asked, but I have to emphasize that because what you see here before you is a representation of an investment of time and human resources to have done much of this work, and much of this work is sorely needed.
Thank you very much. And I just want to end off by saying I really appreciate the focus on culture, which I don't know if it can necessarily be captured in the data that we've been gathering. So I do very much appreciate that continues to stay on top of the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Trustee Bell. And we're going to go to Ms. Lamba.
Whoops. I'll try to make my question really quick because I know the time. So thank you for this. It's nice to see it all here. I'm just kind of curious where you, because it's a progress report and the next 2 years are going to be impact. What are your thoughts on about measuring impact? Because it's really hard to, like, it looks great on paper, right? But we really want to know if it is making a difference. Can you give a kind of an idea of what that means next?
Thank you so much for the question, Ms. Lamba. And I would say to you that is $1 million question, because there are lots of things that we believe will have an impact. That the feedback that we have received, the consultations that we've done, would suggest that there are certain actions that need to be undertaken. So when we go again to talking about the de-streaming piece, that wasn't kind of conjured up out of nowhere. That does come out of research, that does come out of data and so forth. But in terms of going back to Trustee Scott's comments, when is the impact going to be felt? And so one of the things that's really concerning is, we're not kind of a widget industry where if we put a widget in this place, then you're going to get a different outcome in 20 minutes. That in fact, when we actually make a change, for example, around instructional practice, it's first getting that instructional practice to change, then ensuring that there's fidelity to that instructional practice that is different, and then measuring what is the impact over time, because it is incremental. And so one of the challenges in education is that we make a change, we do something, we have an impact or an implementation. The change isn't imminent or evident in the next year's results, and so it's an abandonment. And we see that when we do a lot of the student achievement work, measuring through EQAO, which is work that I've watched over time, that we talk about when we didn't hit the target, but we don't measure the improvement, and then what we measure as improvement, maybe not what the improvement that's really there. So I'll give, for example, where it is that we set targets around Indigenous, the outcomes for Indigenous students. We are very presumptuous, in my opinion, about what it is we've identified as what matters in terms of success indicators for Indigenous students. So we'll use AQAO, for example, or report card data. And again, there is a presumption that that is in fact the indicator of an improved outcome. So we are struggling with that piece and having some pretty robust conversations. And when I said earlier, we've learned more about data. We've learned more about what data means. We've learned more about what measurement means. And so what we thought of 2 years ago, that may be the things that we measure to indicate improvement, may still be those things, but it may be those things plus other things in terms of what actually matters. And so there's a lot of research around the fact that people can configure data to make it do what you want it to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the impact has been felt. And I think the question you're asking, Ms. Lamba, is how do we know the impact has been felt? And we're trying to figure that out.
Okay, is there thoughts to I know there's a lot of data, but sometimes I'm just thinking of in some, other places, sometimes they'll have sort of the same survey and then they'll do it again to see if anything changed. Is that sort of the intent and feeling?
There are a lot of ways that we have been undertaking data. The thought exchange has been referenced as already. Our focus groups and our student voice pieces have been pieces where we have collected the information that has come from students and pointed observation around asking simple questions. We used to have this, now we have this. What difference does it make? And so it isn't just a question of numeric and quantitative data. It is also a question around the qualitative data and the experience data that has been shared. We've done an employee engagement survey. That is a good example of the kind, it's not just who you are, but how you feel. And there is an opportunity to do that again. I would say to you, however, we just completed that. So asking that in the middle of COVID, asking that question in 2 years, I'm not sure it yields, we'll ask it, but I'm not sure it yields the kind of reliable information as when we ask it in 4 years, where at that point we may see some more reliability in what the data is telling us. I think that Trustee Fisher raised the question of moving the needle, if you will. So I think that there is a not necessarily a landing point, but a question of, are we moving the needle to see improvement or see that things are taking hold? And I think that Trustee Fisher has used in the past the notion of taking stock and recalibrating our moves, because if we're doing something over and over, it's not making any change, then maybe we don't just continue doing it for 4 years, but we make some adjustments, and that's the value of tracking whether or not the impact is being felt. So it's not just a kind of an end time measurement, but it is a midpoint measurement. Our challenge is that midpoint is kind of in the middle of a bit of an episode, a global episode that we're all trying to navigate.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone, for a good discussion on that report. And thank you, Madam Director, for some very, very interesting comments. It's very good. And thank you for the report. And we're moving on in our agenda to item 8.2, report 21-066, update on the policy review process for 2021-2022. And I'd like to call upon Madam Director to introduce that report as well.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'm going to ask our Executive Officer, Giroux, to take the helm. She and Manager Guthrie have been working quite diligently around this very complex and broad issue. So I'll turn it directly over to Executive Officer Giroux at this point.
Thanks very much. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that we had a lot of discussion about policies last year, and we had a chance to meet with trustees and get some feedback. And we've been doing some work since then. And Manager Guthrie has been leading a lot of this work. And usually Manager Guthrie is wearing so many hats in these meetings that she doesn't have much time to speak to the work that she's generating. Tonight, we've arranged to have some additional staff here so that she can walk us through this report. So I'm going to invite her to do that now, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. So in the interest of time, I will keep my comments and remarks on the report short. Further to Executive Officer Giroux's comments on our conversations with trustees in early June, we had some wonderful opportunities to meet with small groups of trustees and discuss how we feel we could renew and re-energize the policy review process. And coming from those conversations, we actually began to do a little bit of the work. We undertook this summer a gap analysis framework where we organized and ranked the 143 policies of the board, noting the senior lead for each of those policies and diving a little bit deeper into some of the kinds of issues we feel are needed in the review of those policies. We also, thanks to a initiative put forth by Trustee Bell, were able to hire an additional policy analyst, and we now have, much to the delight of our present policy analyst, a policy analyst team, and we are anxious to get to some of the work on our policies and renewing our approach. One of the other things we contemplated after the conversations with trustees was a differentiated approach to streamline the policy review process. And we've outlined in the report that approach, and looking forward to hearing trustee thoughts on that and further expanding upon that as we work through both some of the policies we have currently on the schedule for review this year, and possibly a review of our broader policy on policies and its accompanying procedure. So we will, as the report outlines, be working towards the initiation of several new policies this year. We also hope to approve several of the policies that were under review and initiated in 2019, 2020. We hope to complete several of those as well. So with our new policy team in place and supporting our senior policy leads, we anticipate that we'll have an opportunity to complete a policy framework toolkit. We anticipate that we will also be able to create a compendium of policy and procedure definitions. We are planning to do some work to the policy page of the website, which will engage our community in providing more detailed comments and input into our policy review process. We also are contemplating some omnibus policy changes, which would factor in some of the gender identity language, as well as some equity pieces. Policy team also hoping to work on some frameworks. So at the end of the policy in Appendix C, you will have or be able to see a rough outline of a timeline that we're proposing, which would in essence get us back on a regular track to an annual cyclical review of our policies and procedures at the board. So happy to answer any of the questions that you might have. I'm looking forward to getting things started this year with our new team.
Thank you very much. And, oh, Trustee Campbell has a question.
Sure. Oopsie daisy. There we go. Sure. Yeah. Question probably embedded in here. Some comments as well. First of all, my appreciation. It's clear that staff have done some very serious thinking here, and I love the way some of this classification and categorization has been done, and the vision for process. I think it's really, there's some really nice thinking there. I would like, as a trustee, I don't think I've received it, though one never knows, I miss things, the master list of priority rankings of policies. I think I'd like to see that and where various things ended up. after all, you have, for instance, in the priority ranking, B is board motion after legislative ministry directive. And not that I necessarily want to create work or shake all kinds of things up, but I would want to reflect, I think, on where certain policy work ended up in terms of the staff ranking. And at the end of the day, of course, whatever trustees may or may not think, policy, right, is the purview of the board. So I think it'd be useful to get that master list for review. In terms of going to some of the questions and stuff, I like the differentiated approach. I think that I can't even begin to get to the policy and policies. I love the fact that we'll get back to a cyclical review finally, after so many years. In terms of one of the things, and it's come up before, and I think staff have modified the process to some extent, some of the consultation processes going on regarding the board of trustees in a sense, and advisory committees and others, but in a sense as stakeholders, at least when it comes to governance concerns and in other ways. I think it's probably a mistake, and I think I can't speak for everybody, but I would like to think everybody's learned that lesson. One can't assume that a policy will come to a board for a quick approval, especially a substantive. There's some contentious elements, what have you. There does need to be trustee input and time for a trustee debate and that kind of thing. But staff have, I think, amended their approach to some extent to include more trustee discussion time and consultation time. So that's helped. In terms of the ad hoc committee, my time's running out. I don't really want to go on again. I do note that several boards, I reviewed 16 of, I have another 8 I want to review, either have a policy committee or a governance committee. A couple have both, and 1 or 2 have a combined body. So I would look, to be honest, at best practices other boards and why a lot of other boards have them. And maybe we could discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Campbell. And moving on to Trustee Ellis.
If I could just respond to Trustee
Sure, sorry there,
Campbell.
Manager Guthrie, go ahead.
That's okay. We did contemplate, it was certainly one of the areas that trustees raised in our conversations in June, was the thought of an ad hoc committee. And we have given it some thought, and I'm glad you brought it forward. There was still some, I won't say confusion, but we look for some clarity on whether or not that ad hoc committee supports specifically the policy review process itself, whereby the committee would be specifically looking at those policies that we have currently under review, or would the mandate of the ad hoc committee be a little bit broader and get to or speak to the governance part of policy and what is a policy? So we were hoping for some input and clarification on that here this evening. So interested in those thoughts.
Can you put it back on the list, Mr. Chair?
No problem, Trustee Campbell. Trustee Ellis.
Well, my question was exactly around the ad hoc committees. So here's my input. I think it's necessary. We should have it. And I think it should be the broader scope to look at the broader scope of policy, plus, but as well, the nuts and bolts of the policies. I've always found that an extra set of eyes, especially trustee eyes, earlier in the process than later, is makes things go smoother. So my question was asked, answered, and I've given my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Ellis. And I think we can still get to a place where we would see a ad hoc committee being formed, could possibly be formed at the board org, should we see a motion come forward at the board meeting in November. We can then add that to the list of committees formed at the board org, with the possibility of the ad hoc group beginning their meetings in the new year.
So we'd be needing it, sorry for jumping in, Trustee Scott. So we need a term of reference and it's for the November, okay, there's a timeline for us. I'll be in touch.
I think Trustee Ellison, and then to the broader question, we recognize the interest in an ad hoc committee. And as we were preparing this report, we were stuck at what the right mandate is. And there's enough work here for us to navigate our way through. And as Manager Guthrie indicated, we definitely will come back. We thought it would be helpful, rather than to have all the questions answered, to come with this report and hear the discussion and then start thinking about next steps, keeping in mind that we've only just started that new policy analyst position this week and have some orientation and building to do with that team. So absolutely want to get to that and may need a little bit more time before we're ready.
All right, thank you very much. And we're going on to Trustee Scott.
Thank you. And I was absolutely delighted to see this report here at last, because policy review and development has been a bit of a thorn in a number of our sides for quite a while. I'm not going to try to repeat Trustee Campbell's and Trustee Ellis's comments. I certainly am running in the same direction on this. I look at the Toronto board, for example, where their policy committee actually helps to develop that list of priorities and so on. Some of the priorities are clearly going to be identified by staff because you see the operational need where a policy that we've established isn't working. But there are also going to be other policies that we decide we need or that we decide need to be reviewed for reasons that should be coming from trustees and not relying entirely on staff to identify all of those things. The whole thing, of course, having to still take place within the context of our overall strategic plan. We are so far behind right now on keeping our policies up to date, and it's not because we don't have good people. We have had some excellent people, but there simply aren't enough of them, and there aren't enough hours in the day to do it. So I think that it is really important to consider having an ad hoc committee, but it's also going to be very important to make sure that the mandate does include that support for establishing the priority lists, as well as some of the early work and early input into what elements of a policy need to be reviewed and looking at them again before they come into committee of the whole for broader consideration. The consultation aspects are also an important piece of it. Toronto Board actually has a very neat set of checklists for what kind of consultation and when consultation and so on, and I have shared those with staff after I found them. I think we will probably be wanting something like that running in the background, which would also help in defining the mandate for any ad hoc committee or special purpose committee that we might want to establish. I always worry a bit about doing an ad hoc committee for something that's going to be ongoing. An ad hoc committee typically has a time-limited mandate and an expected set of deliverables by a particular deadline. I don't think our policies necessarily lend themselves to that sort of structure, so it may be better to consider a special purpose committee.
Thank you very much, Trustee Scott. Moving on to Ms. Lamba.
I was just curious to know when you had commented on bringing the equity piece in, because for me, when you're doing a policy is part of the systems. And so when you do a review of that through an equity lens, you start from the beginning, even sort of what policies you select or this this ad hoc committee or, policy committee that might be created, and then each and every individual policy would go through that lens. Are you able to, have you put some thought to what that looks like? Just a question.
I think we have, in the context, Manager Guthrie outlined some of the policy work that's currently underway. And you'll see on that list that a number of the policies, particularly new policies that are being developed, and some of the larger policies that are under review this year, are really driven by the need to bring an equity lens to that work. The human rights policy and Indigenous rights policy, the kinds of changes we're looking at in terms of the safe schools policy. So that gets at the policy content. The next piece I want to speak to is, in order to get ready for an ad hoc committee or for a review process, a fundamental piece is to understand what is the process, right? And what we know currently, and this goes a bit broader than your question, but what we know currently is we're applying the same level of review and the same set of practices to policy amendments, regardless of whether they're big or small. And we are not then necessarily, or we have not been able to bring a lens to a whole bunch of different things. And so a really important piece in this step is getting to that differentiated process. So learning to have a conversation about what are we doing in this case, and what are the steps then that are involved, so that we could manage the work. So I think, yes, in both the short term and the long term is the answer to your question. And there are some pieces in between that we're just trying to build together so that we've got a process that can carry us through.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure I fully understand where the equity piece came in. I do understand that some of the policies are, human rights policy and the Indigenous policy, but even policies on the face of it that may not look like it's human rights related, you still do an equity lens to it. How does it impact this group? How does it impact the next group and the next group, right? And that will be very important to do regardless of the policy. And even in selecting policies, you go through, okay, which policy, although some of them may seem pretty obvious, like the safe schools or whatnot, but then you have so many policies, right? Over 100, 130 in some. So doing an equity analysis or a lens of that can be time consuming and difficult, right? So I think it's really important to put that into your steps, into the steps of what you're going to do right from the outset, because I know if you go through it and you don't do that from the outset, in determining the policies and the structures you put in, should have equity integrated right into it. I know it's time consuming, but it's well worth it, because if you come out with a policy that hasn't done that, then, you're perpetuating the same things over again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find this conversation interesting. On the one hand, we had a debate about, getting as many voices as we can involved in the process. And now we're having a conversation about making sure a very select group of people kind of control the process at the outset. And not that I'm saying I'm opposed to it necessarily. I also find it interesting when we say, well, this board, does that, and that board does that, and it's best practices, so we might want to take a look at it. And then we say, well, no boards do this, but we're going to do it anyways. And so I just find us, in my opinion, we do a lot of contradicting ourselves. However, having said that, if we are going to have, I agree with Chair Scott, if we're going to have another committee, I agree with her. It's not going to be an ad hoc committee, because obviously a board of trustees is going to be dealing with policy forever. That's our job. And secondly, I would want this committee not to meet during the day. I would very forcefully, kind of bordering on demand, that it not meet during the day, because if it meets during the day, then you are not providing equity to the Board of Trustees itself, because many of us are still of working age. We are not retired, or not independently wealthy, and then our voices are lost if you insist on having this committee meet during the day. I would also ask that its membership be fairly large in a number, so that it have as much voice as possible. And I would also ask that I would also want to know, is it a public meeting? Is it a private meeting? Would it follow the normal processes of a committee? It would be posted publicly. The public would be able to watch it, maybe obviously not participate, because from what I say, we want trustees only to be able to have this input at this level. So, and I'm not sure if this can all be, if we're looking at doing something at our org meeting, which is in less than, well, it's in about 3 weeks from now. So those are things, if it in fact comes to board at that time, that I will be looking for, and I would trust that my colleagues would feel the same way I do.
Thank you very much. And turning it to Ms. Miller, go ahead.
Hi. I was wondering if the review of the policies, if you've considered guiding your review using the TRC calls for action surrounding education and child welfare. And then also, similar to that, I'm thinking about, decolonizing of policies as you go. And if so, who, not everyone can apply that lens, like the equity lens. It's who do you have to help with that?
Sorry, I was just making some notes as we went. So it's an excellent question, and both this question and Ms. Lamba's questions and Trustee Blackburn's questions speak to a number of the issues that still need to be addressed as we go through this process. And so we don't have all the answers. This is a discussion report so that we can report on where we were with the conversations and where we might need to go next. I think you raise some really interesting issues about how we align with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report, and definitely we'll take a look at that. And we will need to have a framework for bringing in equity and Indigenous lens to the policy review process. And that may be, we've talked about the possibility of the work of committee. That may be part of the work of the committee. That may be that we find some ways to do that, but we're not ready to answer how we'll do that yet. We're only looking at what are the pieces that we have to build into this process in order to make sure the process meets all of our needs. So thank you very much for that input.
I just, I'm just concerned that it sounds like there's a mountain of work to do, and I've learned that policies are although not the most interesting, they're super important, and they really do affect how the children go through their education. So I just wanted to express that. my hope is that you get the right consults for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miller. Very good points. And I think we're back at Trustee Campbell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I guess great debate, great interesting thoughts. I did post in the chat a link to the TDSB's flowchart on policy development. There are a couple of references to their policy committee there. They weigh in at a couple of points. I think probably in the early phase, I sort of liken it. The way I see their suggested process is more in the nature of a steering committee kind of thing, process flow. Things have to go through an equity assessment using an equity assessment tool. I don't know if we have that, but anyway, out for broad consultation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then sort of when it's done, sort of goes back to the governance and policy committee. They help set the stage and the process moving back to governance policy committee, and then on to board. So, I mean, I think things could range from being effectively a steering committee to being a forum for, if not debating, and that would be the question, that would be maybe the contentious thing, or at least identifying key matters for debate. Key matters that a lot will turn on for a lot of people, and maybe separately identifying those for the board and for communities, and maybe for separate determination outside the policy. But in any event, I guess what I'm thinking is that it may be a little bit premature to decide on a special purpose committee with a defined mandate by this org, because I think a lot of people have to think about a lot of things, which is why I'm thinking, though, maybe an ad hoc committee. I mean, this is like committees leading committees, but an ad hoc committee could perhaps be formed usefully at org, which might dive into these matters along with staff and consulting and everything else with folks, and come up with respect more to the policy on policies and policy development process. And in fact, to effectively take what will be a lot of hours of discussion, I'm sure, offline from the COW and the board, and come back to the board with a recommendation in terms of how to proceed, which may or may not be accepted by the board. So I'm thinking actually an ad hoc leading potentially or not to a special purpose might be the way to go, but I have to think about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Campbell. And seeing no further discussions, seeing no further hands. Oh, Trustee Blackburn, go ahead. You're muted, Trustee Blackburn.
Sorry, struggling with my mute situation tonight. I apologize. Again, I don't necessarily disagree with what Trustee Campbell has just stated. However, in my experience, when we strike these committees, they are struck and they're struck and they're during the day. And then again, we don't even provide equity on our own board to people of varying personal life circumstances, which to me is kind of hypocritical on our part. And so if we're gonna and again, I do wholeheartedly agree with him that I don't think we can get this all sorted in 3 weeks. However, I would maybe and I'm not convinced Trustee Campbell has the answer either. So maybe if I could have a comment from the executive officer, can we not, if we decide to go with an ongoing type of committee that looks at policy, can we strike that at any time during the mandate? Do we have, so I see you nodding. We don't have to strike it on December 1st.
We don't have to. That's a path. What we need is clarity about what the best structure is. And we need to bring back a report that proposes a model. I think there's lots of interesting suggestions raised tonight, and we'll need to reflect on those. And I think when we bring a report back to you, one of the ways we'll have to provide some opportunity for the committee to look at, for this committee to look at how a policy committee might work, is in the context of where do you want to spend your time and what do you want the outcomes to be? Because there's a balance between conversations about process versus conversations about that get to policy change. And our challenge right now is we need to do a lot of all of that. And so that's why, you know, and we're still dealing with the COVID reality. And so we still have workload implications. So that's why we're here in November and not September. And it's why, you know, when we looked at this report last week, we didn't have it out 10 days before, because last week we still were saying, we can go this far, but we can't say this yet. We're not comfortable. We haven't had enough time to go deeper. So we will take this conversation away and come back and bring back a report where we look a little bit more about what's the next step for our committee and propose some thoughts about mandate based on what we've heard from you tonight.
Thank you, Executive Officer, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Blackburn, and on to Trustee Scott.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I kind of like the idea of maybe using an ad hoc committee in the short term with a deadline to help to arrive at something around process. And I agree completely with Trustee Blackburn that it is really challenging for a number of our board members to be able to make daytime meetings. So we have to figure out a way that will allow the broadest possible participation. When I look at the list of policies in the report that are coming up through this year, I'm assuming that some of them are there because of trustee requests. For example, the desire for a policy on exclusions. But there are also others that are there probably because there are some significant and fairly urgent operational needs to have a different policy to address them, such as the one on field trips. And then one of the key pieces also is a policy on Indigenous rights, which has come out of the work that has already been done on the human rights policy. So that's an awful lot that's already on our plate. We are going to be hard pressed to complete that work this year as a board. And yet we have so many more things, more policies to do. We're looking here at a structure that has to be sustainable in the long term. And once we get into a cycle, then it should be possible to actually have cyclical review. Most policies, there will always be some that will have to crop up out of order because of particular circumstances at a time. So I think that the more careful thought we put into this, if we did strike an ad hoc committee, probably to do that sooner rather than later. But in terms of the ongoing work, then I think that's where the special purpose committee probably belongs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I did see Trustee Schwartz with her hand up.
Yeah, I took it down, Trustee Penny, only because I concur with what Lynn was saying and was going to raise similar points. So I'm good. Just to say, I do like the differentiated approach that that's being noted here. It would be good to see kind of what would kind of fall under those different elements as examples. Because I think that could, sorry, I realize I don't have my camera on. That would be quite helpful to distinguish a few of those key things, because I don't think you can do a comprehensive review or new policy. You can't do many of those in a school year, but I think there's lots that we could look at in terms of sort of the housekeeping or renewal ones that we could get through quite quickly. And I would concur with the idea of kind of an ad hoc committee could help, or a special committee, however you want to structure it, could help distinguish what goes kind of where on an annual basis.
Thank you very much. And see no further hands up. Thank you very much for a very good discussion. And I'm certain that Executive Officer Drew and Manager Guthrie have got some good input. One thing our trustees are not shy of is giving input, so that's good. So let's move on in our agenda. It's getting close to the end here. And the next item is report from OSPA representatives. And that I think goes to me because I was at the Eastern Region meeting this weekend, so I'll just run over quickly. The two main things that were covered off in that meeting were an update of Project Compass, which is OSPA's initiative to totally reform itself in terms of its governance, in terms of its mission, in terms of its priority setting, and in terms of its procedures and policies. And that consultation at the meeting was led by Laurie French, the president of the Canadian School Boards Association. And there is an opportunity for other trustees, our trustees, there's 4 dates in December that are available for them to also give their feedback and input to that. Very important project because, of course, OSPA is one of the main official advocacy avenues for trustees. The second, and I'll give a written report to everyone on this. I just don't have it at the moment. The second item was feedback on the GSNs, and OSPA would like trustees to input feedback to them. You can either do it directly to Kathy, or you can go through us if you wish. They're going to submit their input to the ministry on November 15th. I believe our board also is going to be submitting something, maybe, I don't know. But I know that OSPA is very serious about this. And they've been successful in the past in actually making progress on changing some things on the GSN. So they do find it helpful. The next meeting for the Eastern Region OSPA is going to be January 28th, 2022. That's a Friday, which is weird. But anyway, so I would invite all trustees to attend that meeting on January 28th. So, and that concludes my report on the Eastern Region meeting. So moving on in the agenda to item 9.2, new ministry initiatives update. And Director, are there any new ministry initiatives?
No, Chair, there are no new initiatives.
Thank you very much. Next item, OSTA update. Trustee Jenikins, is there any update from OSTA?
I believe Trustee Scott at the beginning of our meeting just provided an update. But I'll certainly say, though, we met this week for the annual general meeting where Ms. Kiriako provided an update on driver recruitment and a number of initiatives that OSTA is working on to improve safety and transportation for our students. And certainly if anyone has any questions, they can certainly reach out to Vicki or myself.
Sounds good. We do have a question from Trustee Scott.
Not actually a question on the OSTA update, but rather going back to the OSPA report. There is a sort of a survey that's been sent to the directors asking for one response from each board on the GSN's question. And what I would like to do is to work with Trustees Penny and Boothby to make sure we gather information from all trustees so that we can have a real district response to that particular survey. But I haven't seen the survey questions yet, so I don't know where we will be starting exactly. However, we will work out a process. And Trustee Blackburn had her hand up before and I presume it was something related to the OSPA report.
Thank you very much, Trustee Scott. Yes, that's a good process. We'll do that. Trustee Blackburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to add one thing to your report. To note that President French did mention at the Eastern meeting that the intention is to have an in-person Canadian School Boards Association meeting this year in July. And rather than have it on the traditional time, which is around Canada Day, it will be pushed one weekend further down. So if trustees are interested in that, you might want to start penciling that in. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And I might add that that meeting will be in Regina, Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Okay, and moving on, new business information and inquiries. Are there any items of new business or inquiries? And seeing none, I'd like to thank everyone for the meeting this evening. Very businesslike, and I guess we are adjourned. So thank you very much, and we'll see you at the next meeting.